Yeah, no worries.
Does anybody on here play golf and free next Thursday?
That's good stuff. Brilliant. Well, take care.
I thought I could walk the dog and let you go and play golf.
I'm not walking the dog that morning. 9 o'clock at Southfields next Thursday.
Yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted in its own way.
My original partner's gone on holiday.
No worries. Oh no! Like I say, this wasn't one for you to do any work on. It was just if you wanted to participate or could. Yeah. So don't worry. Yeah.
How's it going, Peter?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good. I'm good now. This one won't go on till 2 a.m. So
No.
I think the spirit might be a little bit strong for that.
I know. Tell me about it.
I had a dream about you the other night, Steve.
Yeah, but we need to leave that conversation there, I think.
Me and you were drinking.
I'll swallow a dictionary on the way.
Me and you were drinking an IPA that was finished in a LaCroix cask, and it was £78 for a third of a pint. We're sat in this pub drinking it.
I hope it was your round.
Well, Carl and Lorraine were there, but they wouldn't pay for it.
No way. Hi everybody. I had a decent excuse for that nipping away for a second. That was Jim McEwen. I mean, how often do you get the chance to have Jim McEwen ring you up and have a chat about, because he was hoping to join us for the New Make session tonight, and he's definitely coming along to the 10th of October as well, just to join us for the New Make sessions as well. So, but obviously that's mainly about the 24th of October for the private audience and tasting with him. So anyway, it looks like we've got a bit more fuller room, and we're meant to be kicking off in a second. So, hi. Was that some coughing or?
Carl, how many are in this session? Because I've got both, and I've lost count.
Right. So we have. So what you should have lined up tonight is samples 1 through to 7.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
That's good.
And the first one that we have tonight is going to be the White Peak Distillery. But I'm going to just give a sort of intro first, and it's going to be very informal, the same sort of thing as usual. Somebody from nearly all of the distilleries will be joining us to just talk through their new make. And I'm pleased to say that Max I hope I pronounced that correctly. Max is with us from White Peak, so I'll be introducing him as soon as I've gone through a little bit of a spiel myself. We'll just give people a little bit longer so that they can join just in case, because I don't think everybody's there. There's Dave. Ross is there now.
Who's Matt, Dave?
People are joining us there. Chris. Hi, Chris.
Hey.
Hi, Henry. Hi, Fiona. So, there's Tim. So I'll just give it another minute, and we'll. Just out of interest, has everybody sort of got their 7 in front of them? So it's 1 to 7 tonight.
Yep.
Of your sample set. I don't know how you might like to lay them out. I mean, anybody who spotted, I did a quick live video earlier just to kind of explain how I've laid out mine. So I don't know if you can see. What I did was I took 1 CL, so half of the sample, and I put, I watered down 1 CL with the same amount of water, so brought it down 50% of the normal ABV. And then I've got the other 1 CL is neat, and I don't know if that's a good approach, but hell, I thought that's the way I was going to approach this. If anybody's got any other suggestions, I don't think anybody in the world has ever done something as stupid as this. And you guys are going to be guinea pigs just like me. I mean, I don't know if has anybody ever heard anybody doing a new make lineup like this, where you get umpteen distilleries or more. In fact, we have 12 distilleries in the 2 sessions. Has anybody heard of anything like that before?
No.
Oh, new make, God no.
No.
There probably wouldn't be any survivors anyway, would there?
That's true. They probably did do it and then died. That's great. Nice knowing you guys. You know, that's all I'm saying. Yeah, and
He who does.
Dressing gown for joining. I just realised you're wearing dressing gowns. Oh no! This better not be a start or something.
I've no idea. No.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks for that. So I'll tell you what, we'll kick off. It's 3 minutes past. Yeah, I don't suppose, would you mind just muting yourselves for a moment? And that'll be great, just in case there's any background noise. And obviously, it's going to be very informal and stuff. If you've got a question to ask, just raise your hand or stick it in the chat. And obviously, we'll get you on, and you can either, like I say, the question in chat, or we'll bring you in so that you can have a chat and ask your question or whatever. So, guys, tonight we have 7 new makes. 6 distilleries are represented. Start with White Peak, and then work through to Milk and Honey. Now, I don't know if you're aware, I don't know if everybody's had a quick look at the lineup for tonight. It's on the PDF that I've posted up on the group. But tonight we have an English distillery, which is White Peak. We've got 2, let's say, relatively new distilleries in Scotland, Dornoch and Lindo's Abbey. We have a well-established Scottish distillery, Glenallachie. We have then Republic of Ireland distillery, Dingle. And then we've got 2 makes from Milk and Honey, an Israeli distillery. So the reason why I picked this particular lineup was kind of to give us a feel for the contrast that might be there between all of those distilleries. Because I don't know about you guys, but when I first started thinking up this idea of actually doing a new make tasting, I think the biggest question I had in my head, I mean, whenever I do a distillery, I always tend to ask about trying the new make when I'm there. It's kind of in isolation. And I've often found that a lot of the new makes, I've had different reactions to them at the time, but we know how our brains play tricks with us. When you're at a distillery, you know, you're in a different environment, and you certainly don't get a chance to compare and contrast. So for me, I guess I kind of thought, is this genuinely, how horrible would it be that we try 13 different new makes over these 2 sessions and there's no difference? I mean, can you, just getting my head around this, that ultimately means that it doesn't matter what the distillery's processes are, what barley they might use, how they might, you know, what malted barley they might acquire, build, you know, buy in or even grow in the likes of Daft Mill, for example. It doesn't matter, you know, what they do in terms of the cut. You know, if all of those things mean that the new make fundamentally tastes and has the same sort of mouthfeel, and imagine, you know, like for me, that just would be awful in many respects, because that means ultimately you could have one big distiller just churning out however much new make, and you know, it's actually what happens after you've made it you know, the wood management, the casks that it goes into, the environment that it matures in, you know, whether it's the central belt or on Isla, you know, all of these things are the entire makeup of the eventual profile of the whiskey, you know, what we get from it. Now, I don't know about you, but that scares the hell out of me. I'm fairly sure that isn't the case. I'm 90% certain. In fact, probably higher than that, to be honest. I'll be amazed if we don't see some very significant differences in this new make. So I guess that was kind of how, you know, what made me sort of pull this together. And I'm really pleased at the level of interest that it's generated and that you guys decided to join in. I've actually had about 40 sets of the new make, you know, bought and obviously you guys, thanks very much for coming along to the live tasting. And this is being recorded for posterity, so we can see what faces people pull when they first try the new makes, or how good or bad you find this. But really, I guess that's kind of what my thought process was behind this, was really about trying to bring a number of new makes together so we could actually once and for all get in our own minds, because ultimately what other people might tell us, you know, as we all know, whiskey is a very personal thing. And I hope that every one of us gets a personal journey and can make up their own mind as to just how much the new make genuinely does make a difference. And whether you're buying from Glenallachie or whether you're buying whiskey from Dingle or from Milk and Honey, from any of those distilleries, it genuinely makes a difference right at the start, right at the, you know, whatever they're using as the ingredients to make the new make and however they make that new make makes a genuine difference. It's not all down entirely to the cask and the wood management and all the other things around, you know, all that little micro environment and so on. Sorry, I'm getting a bit confused there. That it has got something to do with all of those things. So anyway, I'm going to shut up for a second. Does anybody want to give their view before we start? And any views in terms of how you might want to approach each of these new makes before I introduce our first new make and introduce Max? So does anybody want to jump in? Let's have a look. Has any questions been asked so far? Raise a hand, anybody, if you want to have a quick word or give your view on this. Anybody? Approach with caution, I think, Carl, yeah. I think, Dave, you're right. This stuff is steaming all my glasses up, yeah. Buffalo Trace does corn, right? White Dog as well, yeah, okay. I bought a Lowland new make from there. Right, I mean, I guess there's a bunch being mentioned there, but there's nobody, is there any, anybody want to dive in or anything before we move in and I introduce Max?
Could I say something, please?
Yes, fire away.
Apologies for my voice. I've got pneumonia at the moment. I love new make. I actually buy it to drink it. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how many distilleries and producers are going to be doing that. I bought the Artful Dodge and new make Bimber yesterday. When I'm at whiskey shows, if I can taste the new make, I always do. It's not rough and ready. I'm thinking there's going to be a whole brand of drinkers in their own right who just want to drink new make or want to drink it in addition. And what would be lovely is to taste the new make and then the finished whiskey.
Yeah, I'm with you, Fiona. I genuinely think that some of the new makes I've had have been harsh or big or in some way knocked me sideways, but some have actually been, for me, quite delightful. So almost kind of similar to how I might approach a whiskey in its own right. So yeah, I mean, that's great. Anybody else want to add anything before we genuinely start down the path of no return? We are about to start this. Oh my God.
Bring it on.
Bring it on. That's what I like.
Are all of these unpeated, or are some peated, some non-peated?
Right, so I believe tonight there is just one peated new make. And I purposely, so in the lineup, sample number 6 and sample number 7 are both from Milk and Honey. Toma is from Milk and Honey. He's joined us tonight.
Hi, everyone.
Toma's going to talk us through those 2 new makes very kindly. He's joined us from Israel. And so
if you will be in a situation to hear something after 5 new makes.
Yeah, well, yeah, but heck, by then we'll all be in the same boat.
But I must say that I really like new make, but let's don't forget that we all, I assume that all of us drinking a lot of whiskeys, and it's where it all starts. So it's fascinating to see the beginning of each whiskey from each distillery, and it's not going to be bad. I don't know what you are all.
I guess it's one of those things, Toma. I don't know about anybody else, but I do genuinely feel a little apprehensive. I'm hoping that this doesn't bomb because to start off, we have another session of this on the 10th of October. So, but I genuinely do hold, you know, I do think it's going to be good. I mean, let's face it, you know, we're here, we're going to give it a go. And I have a suspicion.
Yeah, let's don't forget that it's all in high ABV, higher than we all used to drink usually. Yeah. So let's use water. And I saw some of you get prepared and diluted it before. Shall I ask why?
Well, what the reason why I approached, because I noticed that Steve and John, who are joining us tonight, had done the same sort of thing. I had planned to take half of the 2 CL, so 1 CL, and I added 1 CL of water to that to make. So my intention is, I was going to nose the diluted new make. And I don't know, you guys can all approach this however the heck you want. You know, you've paid for your set, how you want to approach it. In fact, the more we experiment, the better. But then I also kept the other half to actually try. So my intention was to try both, to have it diluted down so that hopefully it gives you a chance to kind of experience the new make without as much of the alcohol burn that potentially might get in the way a little. And then also to try it actually neat as well. So that gives you the best of both worlds.
You will have to add water to it, but first sip it in the original strain, and then it's recommended to add water and see where it goes.
Great, yeah.
Good luck.
Thanks, Toma. And Toma, hopefully you'll still be with us and sticking around for talking us through your new make at the end. Yours is number 4, 6, and 7 for those that have got the sample sets.
I will be here and I don't have the tasting kit.
Yeah, sorry, Tom. It should have arrived by now, by the way. I did send it to your UK address. So
to the UK, but I have to send it from the UK.
Yeah, but hopefully you'll get it in time for the 10th of October.
I will, and I'll see the record with the first set.
Brilliant, brilliant. So without further ado, I mean, so I hope that answered your question. I believe there's just one peated new make, and that's good. And the reason why I put Milk and Honeys together was so that we could actually see how they contrast. So I hope that makes sense. And then the next session, we also have some peated in there as well. But I'll focus on tonight. So Max, hello. Max,
hi, Carl.
How are you doing?
Yeah, doing well, doing well.
Brilliant.
So yeah, Carl, look, thanks a lot for inviting us along, and yeah, good evening to everyone. So yeah, I'm Max. Started White Peat Distillery about 4.5 years ago. In terms of getting the business going, pretty much took us 2 years to find a home, build the distillery, get going. So we did our first mash in April 2018. So we've been operating now for about 2.5 years. So we don't have any whiskey yet. We're looking to do our first release in October of next year.
You went quite quickly, Max, though, didn't you? Because the original sort of whole thing started with crowdfunding in 2016. So it is a very sort of new venture in terms of whiskey, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's certainly a new territory. I'm pretty sure we're the first ever whiskey distillery in the Peak District. And yeah, we're still very much in that startup phase. So we're busy trying to build stocks. We're kind of in that kind of weird phase where we've no idea how much whiskey we might sell in the future. But we do know we don't want to run out. So we're basically making as much and as good a quality as we can afford, essentially. We use our new make routinely in our distillery tours. Obviously, during COVID, we've had to sort of suspend those, but we've now just started getting them back going. So I've done 2 tours today, and our new make always features. We're really keen to let people try it, and lots of people approach it with some trepidation for some of the reasons I've been listening to. But for me, it's the favourite part of our tasting. I really like our new make spirit. So I've got a little video. I'm sure you've all seen distilleries, so it's not about showing you around the distillery. It takes about 6 minutes, but I'm just going to kind of probably highlight some of the areas in terms of our approach to whiskey making. I think, as Carl has said, the whole cask maturation side of things is obviously extremely important in terms of, how the spirit ends up when it gets in the bottle. But, for me and for our team, we're really passionate about whiskey making. And, to some extent, that process almost finishes when it goes into the cask. Obviously, the maturation and your wood program is all important. But we've really put our kind of heart and soul into designing the distillery and the whiskey making process. And really the new make is the output of a lot of that. So I'll try and share this video. You'll see the distillery for those of you that haven't been before, which I'm pretty sure is all of you. But I'll talk about our approach to whiskey making. So hopefully this works. If it doesn't, then I'll try again. Can everyone see a video?
Yep.
Okay. So this is our dry goods area coming up, and we use Chris maltings, so we get English barley from East Anglia. That's our barley mill there. I'm just going to pause this video very quickly at this point. Our core expression is actually a lightly peated single malt. For those that are interested, it's about 6 to 8 ppm. So in the background, you can see a 1 ton bag. That's completely unpeated malt barley. And then in the foreground on the left, you can see 25 kilogram bags. Those are heavily peated bags of malt barley. And we basically blend on site. So we use about 80% unpeated and 20% heavily peated. Pot distilling is a batch process. So our batch size is based off 0.6 tons, 600 kilograms of barley, which we blend and mill on site. I'll continue. So we're lightly peated. That's our core expression.
All right. So the new make, Max, just to clarify and make sure that I've already bollocksed up and got it wrong. An element of peat in the first in your sample one, which is the White Peak.
Yes.
This is lightly peated.
It is indeed. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're wandering through the still house now. We're in a World Heritage Site. So this building's about 120 years old. It used to be a wire works. I'm sure we've all seen distilleries. So we're going to go up onto the production platform, and I'll just talk a bit about some of the features of our whiskey making process that kind of contribute to what you're tasting this evening. There's some beautiful cable management, which we're very proud of. So those are our stills. They were handmade to our design by Macmillan in Scotland, 3,000 litre wash still, 2,100 litre spirit still. But we're just going to spin around, have a look in the mash tun. I'm sure you're all familiar with the process. So we're using 600 kilograms of dry barley. So this is a 0.6 ton mash tun. Kind of similar in size to distilleries like the Cotswolds Distillery that you may be familiar with. They've certainly got their whiskey out there. And we're spinning around now. We're just going to walk over to the fermentation vessels. And I'm going to pause once we kind of peer inside the manway, because I just want to talk a little bit about fermentation and about yeast. And that's, totally relevant in terms of a lot of our focus on whiskey making. So we're looking inside one of our FVs now, and I'll just pause at that point. So from 0.6 tons of barley, we make about 3,000 litres of wort. And this fermentation vessel is currently filling with that wort from the bottom up. But what you can see on the surface is yeast. So we use a blend of yeast. We do use some traditional dry distillers yeast. But one of the things that we spent, 2 years researching was live brewer's yeast, effectively. There are a lot of breweries in Derbyshire. There's an enormous heritage of brewing in our region. I mean, Burton-on-Trent is just over the county border, and I guess some would say it's the epicenter for English beer. But I was really fascinated when I started thinking about a whiskey distillery, just about the flavors that you were seeing in craft beer. And, when you talk to brewers, a lot of them will say, yeah, kind of 50% of our flavor comes from the yeast that we're using, or the yeast blends, or the yeast strains. And I hadn't heard a lot of that conversation in whiskey. So a lot of what we did in the early days was go to local breweries, crop some of their yeast and bring it back and do some trial fermentations and distillations. So 2.5 years later, what we do every week now is we drive up to a brewery in the Peak District. We collect 75 litres of live yeast and we pitch it in with a proportion of dry yeast into our FVs. So that's what you can see floating around on the surface there is live brewer's yeast. And it is adding some flavors that we don't see with dry yeast. I mean, that's just our perspective. We really think we're getting some flavors from this live yeast. And also, we're certainly totally unique in working with this particular brewery. So that's the yeast. We do 4-day fermentations, so not necessarily the longest in history. Traditionally in Scotland, you would typically see more like 48 to 60 hours, 2 days, principally because at that point, the yeast has done its job. It's created alcohol from sugar. We allow another couple of days fermentation. It goes into a bacterial phase, which starts to generate some fruity esters, which carry across to our new make. So for us, fermentation is a really key focus, both in terms of yeast strains and live yeast, and also length of fermentation. So we'll just carry on, and I'll probably stop the video in a while, and we'll start talking about the new make itself. But for us, in terms of the whiskey making, fermentation is a really core part of our focus. So we're going to spin around in a minute, and we're just going to look at our 2 stills. You'll all have seen stills before, so I won't labor the point too much. But in terms of still design, that does have some bearing on the spirit we're making. So I'll stop just there briefly. So our wash still is furthest in the background, and in the foreground is our spirit still. You can't see the whole of the spirit still, but it's got a relatively long, tall neck. It's got an upward sloping lie pipe. We're trying to encourage a lot of copper contact and a lot of reflux in our spirit distillation. And what that does, it strips out some of the heavier compounds from the spirit. So we are trying to make a relatively light, fruity new make. Some of that fruit is coming from the yeast that we're using and the length of fermentation. But we, as a new distillery, are trying to shoot for a spirit that comes to fruition relatively young. And we're really hoping our sweet spot's going to be in the 3 to 5 year age type category. We're not setting out to try and make a spirit for long maturation. And so the kind of lighter, fruitier, smoother notes are important to us. I'll just proceed for another minute or so with the video. So the wash still that we're just about to peer into, we convert we basically do an 8% beer or an 8% wash in our fermentation. After the first distillation, we end up with low wines with an average of about 24%. And then after the second distillation, which we're just peering at now, we'll end up collecting about 350 litres of spirit at an average of 72% ABV. We run about 15 minutes of 4 shots. So when the spirit first comes in, it's in the high 70s. And then we'll cut when the spirit gets into the high 60s. So the average we get is 72. So this is the spirit safe, and you can see our new make running off there into one of the bowls. And like I say, we collect about 350 litres from each batch. We're just underneath the platform here. I kind of like to show people this because the pipe work is what really took the length of time when you're installing the distillery. This was all cut, bent and welded on site. There are no buttons down here. There's just manual levers, valves, flow plates. Ours is very much a manual whiskey making process. I'm going to stop the video there because the rest of it kind of goes on a bit for a sort of regular distillery tour. But, you know, I guess we're all here to talk about the new makes that you've got lined up. So, you know, hopefully you've got a little bit of a sense of our focus as a distillery. And yeah, very much fermentation is very key to us, and that whole focus on whiskey making. So in terms of the new make, you know, we're making a lightly peated single malt spirit. So you should get some of that peatiness. It kind of ties in pretty closely with the alcohol when you're at 63% ABV, but a little bit of water is going to give you some separation, I would say. And for me, at least, I get some of that peat and smoke on the finish. I'm just going to remind myself of that.
And I find, Max, for me, I've actually nosed quite a bit now. I haven't tried them yet, but I've nosed both the, if you like, the watered down and the neat, and I find that I can pick up the peat element that you mentioned very much on the neat, but I find the slightly watered down new make a dramatic difference in terms of that fruity profile that you're talking about, that light spirit. It just shines when it's been watered down. Now, obviously, I'm no expert in terms of nosing, but that's kind of how I got there. There was a dramatic difference between the two. I don't know if everybody is sort of doing some form of comparison between, if you like, the watered down version and the neat, but that's what I found anyway. Sorry, Max.
Yeah, I mean, that makes some sense to me, Colin. You know, typically when we're introducing our new make on our distillery tours, you know, we do encourage people to add water so that it's pulling the ABV down in the kind of below 50 range. And I think some of those aromas and flavors that you're talking about certainly come to the fore. I mean, I'm looking right to some of the notes, and it's, you know, it's really interesting. And actually, I'm really pleased to see a lot of people, you know, picking out some of the fruit. You know, I can see apple and sort of grassy notes in there quite a lot. Certainly for me, I get quite a lot of dried fruit in our new make. So things like raisins and figs. But there's kind of, yeah, I can see people have said earthiness. There's always a certain kind of sense of barnyard, I think, to a lot of new makes I try. And you know, to some extent, that's apparent in ours. Also, yeah, the kind of malty biscuits, that would be, you know, reasonably typical of new make. And again, I think that is relevant to ours. But yeah, really pleased to see people, you know, pulling up some fruit on their palates. You know, we're all different, but that is what we're shooting for with our new make spirit.
Max, just out of interest, what do you think makes your, you know, if you were to nail down one or two aspects of how you make your new make, is it the yeast? Because it obviously that's the fact that you are in that Burton region, the fact that, you know, that's investment of time and effort around sort of investigating yeast strains and really sampling or, you know, experimenting around that. Is that, am I right? Is that, would you say that that was something that we might see that separates your new make out from the rest that we're going to be trying? Is that one element of it?
Yeah, Carl, I mean, for sure, if I had to highlight one thing that was really top of our pile in terms of focus on whiskey making, then it's fermentation. And that, you know, and I break that down into yeast and our use of live yeast, and then also length of fermentation. Yeah. Not length of fermentation in the sense that we're looking to be the longest, because, you know, we tried 3 days, we tried 4 days, we tried 5 days, we tried 6 days. And we went back to 4 days because we just felt that for our spirit, with the yeast blend that we were using, that was our sweet spot. So yeah, I think that the combination of those two things, you know, added to that, there are things like the still design for sure, and the way we run our stills and our cut points. You know, those are all things that are, you know, have a sense of uniqueness for every distillery. So I would kind of choose those two aspects, but probably top of the pile in terms of our real focus about what we want to be known as, you know, in terms of our USP, is yeast and fermentation. And yeah, and absolutely, I think the flavors, I mean, I suppose our perspective is the fermentation is where flavor is created. And then, you know, distillation to some extent is where you select or you deselect some of those flavors. So, and we, you know, we're firm believers and very passionate about the flavors that we're getting in fermentation and how those are carrying across to our new make.
Well, I'm going to shut up for a second. You'll all be pleased to know, because I'm going to allow, does anybody want to dive in and give their take on this new make? I mean, I've just tried it, so I'm going to just chew on it a little bit longer. Does anybody want to dive in and give their take on it, or am I going to pick on somebody? Come on. Who's going to volunteer to go in the firing line? Nobody. Right, that's it. I'm going to pick on somebody. Steve. Come on, Steve. I'm going to pick on you.
Coming through loud and clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have split it like Carl has. When I took a first sip of it, I got apples, pears, beautiful fruit for about 2 seconds, and then the ABV galloped in. Not desperately unpleasant, but not as drinkable. But with water, it's surprisingly drinkable. Kind of as Carl's aware, I'm not a massive fan of new make. I haven't had a one that I've particularly liked, and when I signed up for the tasting, I kind of thought it was more an education than an enjoyable night of drinking, if you like. You know, you don't have to love every whiskey to enjoy the journey. But with water, it is surprisingly drinkable. And the water does bring out more fruit. I don't get any peat. I can see a few people mention peat. I don't get that at all. But certainly the tropical fruits, apples, pears, I get that. And I'm a bit surprised. If they're all as drinkable, it'll be a more pleasant evening than I thought.
Well, I found even neat, it was drinkable, but I'm just an alcoholic. No, I found that drinkable. And you're right. I think that there were obviously, I think we may well find this, or I might find this with every one of them, that ABV kind of almost strips away some of that finish that you might ordinarily experience. But I found that the actual 50-50, the use of the water, that I've brought the ABV down to half. I'm beginning to wish I hadn't quite added quite so much water, because I think I've actually stripped away that. It gives you a great nose, but I don't know about anybody else, but I'm finding that it's stripped away a lot of the palate, a lot of the flavor. So for me, I've probably added a bit too much water, and I'm wishing I'd experimented with one of them rather than 7 that way. It's still, like you said, Steve, I still found it actually drinkable in terms of, you know, even when I've brought it down half. So anybody else want to dive in with their view?
Loving the licorice part. I mean, for me, I had like a little bit of licorice in there, which was great. With water, tropical fruits, the kind of mango, the banana, bagage, delightful. And it was one of those that at first I smelt it. It was like, oh, hello, not sure about this. It's going to be this is going to be a hard one, but yeah, very surprisingly approachable.
Yeah, great.
Yeah,
This is
sorry.
I'll say it's go on.
typically when we give it to people on the tour, we have found that kind of north of 55% ABV, the kind of, the alcohol forward aspect tends to be, it can be a little bit too much for, the average visitor. So we typically give it them at 55% ABV. I'd probably kind of agree with you that by adding, 50-50 water, you've probably sort of, maybe slightly overdone it there in terms of dilution. But I mean, just in terms of the peat, and it's been mentioned by Steve, we didn't want to necessarily be identified as a peated whiskey distillery. It was more that when we were looking at different barleys and strains, we just found that a little bit of light peat added some background complexity that we liked. So that's kind of where we ended up, rather than necessarily wanting to be identified as a peated whiskey. I mean, we're only just on the scale at 6 to 8 parts per million.
Okay, great. Does any? Oh, I know Fees just mentioned there that Max, you mentioned that the tasting packs you do does actually include the new make, so you do get the opportunity to have a look at, or to try the new make more, because I know the samples I've given you might be enough for tonight. And I know some of us might actually like to have had a bit more, but you can get more of the new make directly from White Peak. I'm conscious that we've got 7 to go through. So, Has anyone got any other questions to ask Max, or do we dive in for the next sample? Because this is where it starts getting, for me anyway, it gets even more interesting when we're hopefully able to see the, compare and contrast between the new makes.
Can I just ask a quick question, please?
Yeah, go for it.
Max, are you going to be releasing this as a new make when you're, either when people do the tasting tours, especially if they're in the Temperance Club, or when you've got the whiskey out, please?
Fee, we haven't got any plans to release as a bottling yet. That's not to say we won't. I think that, as you mentioned and Carl did, we have been doing online tastings, and our packs include some new make as well as 2 samples of 24-month age spirit. It's something we're still thinking of, Fee, for the future. We kind of took a decision early on not to put it out there, really, because we wanted people to understand a bit more about what we were doing before putting the spirit out, because, some people just don't understand new make, and, understandably, and we wanted to make sure we were having the conversation like we are doing with everyone tonight.
Thanks for that.
Okay.
Max, I have one last question. I know it's very, very early doors, but do you have an idea of what ABV you're going to be releasing at when you?
I mean, look, we'll be doing some cask strength bottlings for sure. In terms of other releases, it's very unlikely you're going to see us doing anything in below kind of 45% ABV. As a craft distillery, that's an area where we can have a point of difference. We'll see, certainly for our early bottlings, we'll be getting together as a team and just thinking about what ABV we think kind of presents a spirit in the best light. It's not cast in stone.
It's still all looking. Thanks, Max.
Thanks, Andrew. Carl, look, I'd just like to say thanks again. I may not be able to hang around for too long, so just whilst I've still got the mic, thanks everyone. I hope you have a great evening. I'm going to hang around and just listen to a few more comments on the next one.
Great, thanks very much, Max, and thanks for sharing the new make as well. I mean, it's with the support of the distilleries, something like this happens. So thanks for that.
I've got a question too, if I can.
Oh, go for it, John.
I know, Max, you said that the percentage of your barley is peated when it goes into the mash. Do you know what sort of ppm it is when it goes in?
Yeah, so the overall ppm, John, is between 6 and 8.
Right, okay. Is that, and what did you say the percentage was? Was it 10% of the?
20. It's about 20% of the of the grist.
So 20% of the grist is peated at 6 to 8 ppm.
No. So the average ppm is 6 to 8. So the 20% itself is going to be probably north of 40.
Oh right, okay. Excellent, thank you.
Great stuff. Right, so thanks very much, Max. I'm conscious that we're running slightly behind, and I just want to check. I think Simon Thompson was meant to be joining us from Dornoch. I don't see him on. Let me just check. Simon, are you with us? I'm not sure whether Simon was going to be able to join us or not. I know he was hoping to, but he may not have been able to join us. So if that's the case, if it's all right with you guys, I know we have number 4 is Glenallachie. And I know we've got Ben with us from the distillery to sort of talk us through that. So if you don't mind, one of our tastings would not be complete had I not bollocksed up on the sample numbers. So we may as well use this as a good excuse to suggest that we move to sample number 4 while we have Ben, because I know, Ben, thank you very much for coming on. I know you can only stick around for about 15 minutes or so. So if it's all right with you guys, and like I say, I don't think Simon's with us, so he may not be able to join us. So if it's all right, we're going to go to sample number 4. And can I welcome Ben Chambers from Glenallachie. Hi, Ben.
Hi, guys. Good evening. Yeah, sorry for the short appearance this evening, but it's firmly into what would have been festival season, as I'm sure you're all aware. And as a result, every night is tasting nights, and it's just going berserk, trying to make sure you're taking part in as many as you can. I think the entire team are currently appearing online somewhere in the world over the course of this evening, and it's a bit bonkers.
Well, thanks, Ben. Thanks for joining us quickly. I know, because I know Billy puts his apologies forward as well. He did actually genuinely want to come on as well, but I presume Billy's actually on a more important bunch of people's call than you. No, I'm only joking.
I wouldn't go that far. I'm trying to understand what he is. I think he's appearing with the LCBO in Canada, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. I didn't give him a huge amount of warning, and Ben even less warning. So thank you very much, Ben, for coming on, and hopefully we'll get another opportunity in the not too distant to talk with Billy again. Anyway, I'm sure. But thanks for coming along, Ben.
No problem.
Now have sample number 4.
Yeah, so sample number 4. So Billy sent you down. Let me just pull mine. I had to scramble around to actually find the right month. Billy sent you down, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Carl, June 2020 new make, and it was at 69.4.
Well, I don't have the actual date on it, but it is 69.4%. So right. Yeah.
Well, right. With it being from this year, that's when it's going to be. We found that month to month, we see variation in the final outturn, the final sort of ABV, which our spirit is being distilled at. It averages out just under the 71% mark, but I was speaking to our operations director, Richard, because I was kind of like, hang on, you always tell me it's 71. Why is this 69.4? And he was saying we had a really hot, dry month up there, and that caused a slightly lower alcohol level for our distillate. I did have a scramble around with Carl when he was asking me to come on as well, saying, which new make is it? Because we kind of have 3. So we have our distillate as it's coming through the stills. Then we have our fill spirits, or our fill levels, which we fill our casks at 2 different fill points. One is 68.5 and one is roughly 63.5. And we do this to get different flavors out of the wood. You'll have to forgive me because I can never remember which way round it is, but one of those levels pulls out more of that sort of honey and spice. And another level really gets sort of more emphasis on the vanilla notes coming through. So that's one of the reasons why for a long, long time, and many distilleries use those fill points for the wood, use 2 different fill levels. But no, we had proper sort of new make before it was adjusted slightly for filling. So we use 2 different barley types with our new make, but this one is 100% concerto barley. We've only recently, in the last sort of 12 months, started experimenting with Diablo. Whether or not that's going to continue or not, I'm not 100% sure. I don't know if Billy's 100% happy with it. And again, the idea is, for those of you that know Billy Walker and know his history through Glendronach, Ben Riach in particular, Glen Glasser, go even further back into Burn Stewart, he loves to experiment. He loves to try new and different things, wood types, cask type, PPM levels, barley types, you name it, he'll play about with it. So he has been experimenting with Diablo, but this is 100% concerto. No peat. So this is completely unpeated barley as well. But very, 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 straight away on the nose. I'm not lucky enough to have the full set of 6, but it's quite a big, meaty spirit, particularly if you were to have another Speyside's new make next to it. And this partially comes from, if you go to Glenallachie, if you've ever been lucky enough to go, or are lucky enough to go in the future, you'll see the stills are huge for Speyside. They're kind of not what you expect. They are big, big units. And we have our sort of quite famous horizontal condensers as well. And this all adds to the weight of spirit. Add to that the fact that Billy, our fermentation period, I think the average in the industry is around about the 70-hour mark. We're looking at 167 hours fermentation time. And this is Billy trying to pull as much of the fruit, as much, yeah, I think that's one of our stills, being one of the Macmillan stills. Yeah, so quite a big, it doesn't quite give, picture I don't think does it justice. Yeah. They are vast for, traditionally on Speyside, the stills can be quite small. I think Craigallachie and Glenallachie in particular have 2 distilleries that have large stills, which kind of goes against the norm. But when you combine those big stills with the extra fermentation time, you get a very, very, very fruit forward, quite big, robust style of spirit.
I don't know about you guys, but I've just tried the neat of the Glenallachie, and dramatically different to what we've just tried with White Peak. Would you say? I mean, is my palate shot, or it is very different?
Yeah.
Almost kind of more savory than the very fruity new make that we had with Max.
Yeah, it's designed to be a big spirit. It's not. The fruit in Glenallachie we found comes out more over time. Billy loves his sort of grapefruit and banana sort of tasting notes as it starts to get to sort of 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. But the spirit, he's trying to make a spirit here that ages, and a spirit that is designed to pair well with as many different wood types as physically possible, because we know how much he loves to play about.
Can I just jump in there for a second, Ben? I can't believe how lucky I've been where I've actually had Max come on from White Peak with precisely the opposite sort of, if you like, intention behind their new make, as you've just outlined with Glenallachie. I mean, that's, that was pure luck. I had no idea that was exactly what Ben would say, and that was what Max would say. That Max's approach and White Peak is all about getting the maximum out of the early of maturation compared with what Ben's just suggested about Glenallachie. So I don't know about you guys, but I see that straight away in that taste. Just dramatic, isn't it? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Well, you know, nobody's wrong, but I don't know about you guys, but that's what I found from that. Thanks, Ben. I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
No, I'm assuming, sorry, Max, I missed your sort of bit. I'm assuming you were talking about perhaps slightly smaller stills, increasing sort of copper contact in a sort of smaller space. I'm not sure what your fill levels and things were, but I'm assuming slightly less in terms of fermentation time, which just gives a lighter sort of fresher style of spirit, which makes for a good young drinking whiskey. I'm not going to say that Glenallachie necessarily is bad young, but the older ones, you know, it's definitely going to stand the test of time. I mean, I've been lucky enough to try some really old casks. I say really old. We only go back to 68, but, you know, I've been able to try some sort of early 70s and things. And I'm amazed that they haven't, having worked for an independent bottler and various things in the past, one of my bugbears with old spirit has been, from a wine background, would be, for me, it's too much tannin, it's over oaking. You know, you're getting far too much of that wood coming through, and it almost spoils the spirit. Whereas because Glenallachie is a bit of a beast, and it's designed to be, you know, it was designed to be the backbone of blends. It was designed, you know, almost like that malt like Cardu, you know, big weighty spirits. It really does stand the test of time. Sorry, Max, do you want to?
Yeah, Ben, no, look, I mean, given that you didn't hear what I said, you've kind of, you know, you've kind of replayed it pretty well. Yeah, I mean, look, we have small stills, you know, our spirit's still 2,100 litres. And yeah, we run a 96-hour fermentation, so it's not short. It's where we found our sweet spot. But yeah, there's some significant differences there, as you say.
I think I was.
Ben, your fermentation is considerably longer, isn't it? Oh, sorry, Ben. Go on.
I was saying our spirit stills, I think, are 28,000 litres, which are
yeah,
monsters.
Yeah. And
also,
actually,
Ben, you have a very different fermentation period as well, because obviously that's one of the things that Billy in particular has really brought about that dramatic change in the fermentation period at Glenallachie.
Yeah, we went up to 167 hours, which, I mean, we went from doing, what was it, 4.2 to 4.5 million litres, which is what Chivas could do, down to about 500, 600,000 litres is what Billy's taken it down to. I think in time,
exact opposite to virtually every other distillery on the planet was trying to up their production. Billy comes along and matches production.
I think in time we'll probably see that scaled up as he does more work to the distillery. You know, if you do get to come and visit it, when he bought it from Chivas, I don't think they'd done anything to it since '68 when it was built. It was, certain rooms and parts are still a bit of a mess. But, you know, he is looking at adding, the big thing for us is the washbacks. You know, when you've got a 167-hour fermentation period, it doesn't take very long to fill them up and not be able to refill it until, you know, so that's kind of, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, there's no plans for it in the immediate future, because we can scale up yet without needing more for the moment. But I wouldn't be surprised if in the future we do end up adding somewhere in the distillery a couple more, because that's how, you know, to maintain the fermentation period, that's how we'd have to do it. So yeah, it's kind of, anybody got any questions? Anything you want to throw at me? Anybody think I'm talking nonsense somehow?
Well, Ben, one of the things that I guess we covered in a fair bit of detail with Max was this whole idea around the yeast that was used, for example. I mean, and this is really not, and I know that this isn't necessarily, you know, you're not involved directly with the production side of things. So, you know, please just say, you know, I'll have to come back to you or whatever. But it was just to kind of get an idea of whether there was any contrast between your approach on the yeast side of things to what Max was talking about.
Okay. Not knowing what Max was talking about, and also not knowing our exact process with yeast, I would have to come back to you.
That's fine. That's fine.
I'm, you know, I love this sort of stuff, and I like getting into the ins and outs of it. But with the whole, you know, not being able to travel as much as we would have all liked and things, I mean, I've been up to the distillery quite a few times, but I'm not getting to spend a huge amount of time there. I'm not getting to chat to the guys there. You know, Mike and Phil, who are two sort of head distillers. You know, I'd love to spend a lot more.
No, that's no worries, Ben. It was just out of interest to check to see if there was that contrast. I suspect there will be, but yeah, that's no problem. Is there any questions?
Yeah.
I know Fiza asked a question there. Do you want to ask it, or shall I?
I can't see it.
I will try, and apologies for my voice. Pneumonia is hellish. Do you sell New Make, please? And if so, is it direct, or do you use an indie bottler like Bimber did with Artful Dodger?
We don't sell on New Make. Billy is very, very, very cautious with selling any liquid at all, whether it be cask or New Make, and basically he won't do it.
Fair enough, thanks.
Sorry.
And I've got a question, if you don't mind. Just really interested about the length of fermentation, and again, appreciate you're not on the production side, but are your washbacks, are they open? Is there any temperature control?
To my knowledge, yes, there is temperature control.
Okay.
But the full ins and outs of it, I don't know.
Okay. No, understood.
If you are wanting to ask questions and things, it's a guy called Mike Duncan and Phil. Can't remember his surname.
Oh, don't worry, Ben. Honestly, it's just really appreciated that you jumped in, because I know, you know, this, you know, you had very short notice on this. No, don't worry about it, Ben. And you know, none of the questions no one will be able to answer everything, but we appreciate anything you can give us. So that's no problem. Does anybody else have any more questions of Ben?
Carl, if it's short notice, what we're talking, are we talking 6:30? Is that when you phoned him?
Not that much longer than that. So yeah, so we're gonna have to forgive Ben a lot and blame it on me. No, that's great. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but there is such a contrast. I mean, it's almost like this one is kind of like the main course, and it's meaty, and it even almost reminds me of like a roast beef or something. You know, it's got that kind of meaty undertones to it. And yet the one we had with Max, the White Peak, that was almost like the dessert, or maybe even the appetizer. You know, I don't, you know, do you know what I mean? I don't know if anybody else is finding that they are literally like chalk and cheese.
Yeah.
Who wants to dive in? Or am I going to pick on somebody again? Go on, Max. Max Howard Evans. Come on. I see you looking. You're itching to talk.
Hey, Carl, how's it going?
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
Thanks.
no, it's interesting. I mean, I'm not as well versed in Glenallachie, so I don't have a particularly good frame of reference. But I think it's interesting because I know that a lot of the reviews I've seen of people doing reviews on Glenallachie sort of outturns have you know, pointed to how much sort of, as Ben has said, they like to experiment, and how sort of cask focused that can be in terms of what you get from the distillery. So in a way, it's really interesting to see that with no cask. You know, I'm going to use the word adulteration. I don't mean it negatively. I just mean like it's really interesting to see what it's like as it comes out, and then obviously you know, sort of really paving the way for a good comparison potentially to, as we say, sort of like the sherry or the other kind of more exotic kind of finishes.
Please ask me about the casks. That's the bit that I love and know backwards. So it's, when we get into the chemistry side and you're asking what yeast and this, that, and the other, it starts to get a bit more difficult.
Yeah, but we're definitely not going to touch casks today. Tonight is all about New Make.
I think it's important. I think it's important to emphasise, though, that, you know, the difference, and I'm not going to, hopefully not going to put my foot in it and say anything I shouldn't, re either Glenallachie or what Max sorry, the gentleman who was on before me was saying. You know, Glenallachie, the key thing to remember with this new make is it was designed to be but originally it was Chivas Brothers, or before that it was the old distilling arm of Scottish and Newcastle. It was their backbone for their blends. It was there to be that big meaty malt that sat behind the lighter Speysides and grain whiskies, etc., that would go into blends long before it was ever designed to be a single malt and produce single malt whiskies for sale as single malt. You know, it was, I think, once during the 80s, a Glenallachie single malt appeared, once or twice during the 90s. You got an official labelling of Glenallachie, and then there was a supermarket edition done just before Billy bought the distillery. But, you know, other than those few sort of very minor forays in, this was designed to be. So it should, you know, what I'm trying to say is it should be different. It should be pulls apart from what you've just tried. You know, because this is what it was designed to be. Sorry, I'm rambling.
That's good. That's good. Any other questions or anything like that? I know, Ben, you're in a difficult spot. You need to be getting away. All right. Okay. Okay. Good. Good. Any other comments or any other input on this? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I really did. I've enjoyed both for very different reasons so far. And I guess I'm just wondering if we can get as much of a contrast between the next 5 that we're going to be trying. I mean, it's an incredible contrast between the two so far. Anybody else got anything else that they want to say before we dive on? No? Okay. In which case, Ben, if you want, you're most welcome to stick around for a bit longer. But I appreciate, thank you very much for coming on so quick.
Go and grab something to eat before I jump on the next one.
Great stuff. Well, thank you very much, Ben.
No worries. Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good evening.
Cheers.
Good night.
Thank you. So, where do we go from here? Now, I still believe Simon Thompson hasn't appeared, so I'm fairly sure he's not going to be coming on now, which is a bit of a shame, because it would have been nice to have had Simon talk us through Dornoch. But what I do notice, and again, I'm not entirely certain, Toma, I know you were sticking around for the end, but I also noticed that Graham's here from Dingle. Hiya, Graham. How are you doing? Hi, Graham.
Hello. Hi. How are you doing?
Yes, good. From sunny Dingle. Is it sunny there?
Sunny, blue skies today.
Oh, very good. Very good. Well, I guess one thing I could do, Graham, is I don't know how much time you've got for this evening. So you're welcome. If you are in a little bit of a hurry, we could move to number 5, which is the Dingle sample, if that's all right. Toma, you all right to still have your... The reason why I'm not jumping... I know you're...
Totally fine.
A later time zone, but the reason why I'm not jumping in straight away with yourself is because I was kind of hoping the peated new make would be the last one.
I'm totally fine.
So apologies if it feels almost like I'm jumping ahead of and then jumping over where you might have had a chance. Anyway, if it's all right, Graham, if you're good, we'll do yours now if that's all right, and then that gives you the flexibility that you can stick around for as long as you want. And so on. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us, Graham. So sample number 5 is Dingle. And since I don't believe Dornoch or Lindo's Abbey have got anybody with us tonight, we'll jump straight into sample number 5. So, Graham, thank you very much for joining us. You very kindly shared Dingle New Make with us. I am still fairly green as grass with Dingle as a whole, and I'm pretty sure I'm not entirely on my own in that. So it's fantastic to get the opportunity to try Dingle. I know you came on relatively early, so I think you caught a lot of what Max and Ben were saying. So I'm just wondering what you got out of their chats initially.
Yeah, it was useful to come on early. I think as they said, you've two contrasting spirits there with the two that come on. You know, one that's much lighter, and Glenallachie obviously quite a heavyweight. You know, Glenallachie was a very traditional blending malt. You know, very, very popular, and that's why Chivas, it was part of the Chivas regime for so long. You know, it would have formed the backbone of many of their blends. So what you've got there is a whiskey or a spirit that can stand up against other spirits and hold its own and give body to a blend. So yeah, interested here. You know, and White Peak is obviously a little bit more subtle. Maybe I don't have the samples, so I'm kind of only going on what I've heard. But you know, it all seemed to make sense. So when you look at Dingle now, what you've got, the differences are, well, the main difference is triple distilled. So it'll be the first triple distilled single malt you've tried. Fermentation-wise and yeast-wise, we're 72-hour fermentation in wooden washbacks, and we use a dried yeast, Maori dried yeast that goes straight into the washback. So a reasonable length of fermentation. The stills are well, the mash size is 1 ton, so you know, that gives you an idea of the size. The washbacks are then 5,000 litres, and that then makes the wash still 5,000 litre as well. With we actually have 3 stills for the triple distillation. You go from the wash still then into what we call the intermediate still, which is roughly about half the size of the wash still, and then the spirit still is slightly bigger than the intermediate, but we run that every three distillations. So it's what it gives us is our 3 stills. Well, our first and our third still are actually ideal for double distillation. So we're able to play around and do different things. But what you've got there is single malt and triple distilled.
Dramatically different nose on the watered down sort of sample I've made here. By the way, this is 65% just
again with triple distilled, the main difference, you know, you heard the guys before saying that their spirit in the receiver will be 71%, which is, you know, your standard double distillation strength that you'll reach, whereas we are hitting almost 80% in the spirit receiver at the end with the triple distillation. So you're starting at a much higher point, but the logic is the same. Take the strength down. Well, we take it down to 65%, so we get a better maturation at that strength than we would leaving it at 80%.
I've just seen some of the comments, and one of the things I'm picking out personally is this is much more flowery. Or, you know, in terms of the first one was almost the one from White Peak was very fruity. Obviously the one from Glenallachie, that was much more meaty, savoury, whereas this is kind of sits somewhere, you know, away from that in terms of out in the meadows, you know. But I know somebody's saying there that I think it was Callum and Kate, you were getting bananas, honey, so you were perhaps more on the fruit side of things as well. Callum, do you want to jump in for a second? Or?
Yeah, I know what you mean about the sort of floral notes, and we do get some floral notes, but I still think number 1 was more flowery as well as being fruity than this one. I think we're 2.5 down out of 13, so I think your experiment of doing this over 2 sessions has been fantastic so far. It's been an eye-opener, certainly for us already, so well on you for that.
And that they're all really nice, but all very different.
I can't believe it. I didn't expect them to be so different. You know, I mean, it's great because obviously we want them to be as different as possible. But I honestly, I'm mildly chuffed, to say the least, that's to be so different so far. And Graham, this is lovely. I mean, I could honestly sit and nose this for as much as I would nose a well-matured whiskey. You know, it has enough complexity there for me. I don't know about you guys, but I'm finding that I could genuinely just sit and nose this. You know, I mean, am I, you know, are you finding the same sort of thing, that this is genuinely has that kind of complexity that you would expect in a 3 years plus 1 day at least whiskey?
Yeah, I think, you know, for me, obviously moving from Scotland, I'm so used to double distillation, and triple distillation was a new thing to me, and it does, you know, I think it does give a lighter spirit at the end. You can't really argue against that, but what we have at Dingle is we do have relatively small stills, and we also have a very slow distillation rate. We're down at about 5 litres per minute, so we give the spirit time to interact with the copper, and, you know, hopefully strip out some of the more of the undesirables. But, you know, having the small stills as well retains character at the end. At least you don't have something that's lost everything. And you know, Dingle as well, people maybe don't know, but Dingle's heading towards its 8th birthday. It was the first of the new distilleries in Ireland, so we're at the head of the oldest of the young crowd. And it's
in December, isn't it? December's your eighth year.
Yeah, December. So it's interesting to see the spirit evolve and mature, because, you know, that was one thing that attracted me coming to Dingle, was, you know, the exciting time that it's at, and really being able to work with it and develop the whiskies for the future. Because the great thing is nobody knows what Dingle tastes like at 12 years old. So it's you know, that's unique to me in Scotland. You know, yes, there are some new distilleries now, but when you work for a distillery that's been there for 100 years, there's not, you know, most things have been found out about that distillery or worked out by then. So you're generally steering the ship there. But whereas, you know, at Dingle we're kind of deciding where the ship is going to go at the moment, which is, you know, it's great fun, and you know, you really feel you're part of the distillery, and you can make your mark and you know, set Dingle on the map for the future. So it's all good fun.
So Graham, I know one of the questions, I think it's scrolled up a bit now because there's loads of comments coming in. But one of the things was, can you remember how your new make at Dingle compares with the likes of Glenmorangie then?
I think you know, Glenmorangie was in terms slightly more fruity, I would say. I think the Dingle has that real malty character, even slightly nutty. So I think, you know, that would be the main standout to me. But you're right. Every new make is different. I remember in my early days when I worked at Glenfiddich, and, you know, the Scottish distillers, if they've got a blend within their ranks, then they'll still be taking in other malts for that blend. And, you know, regularly in the lab there would be 9 or 10 different new makes lined up. And, you know, you didn't have to be an expert. Anybody who passed their nose over all those glasses would find complete differences, huge differences from one to the other. You know, some were grassy, some were fruity, some were floral, some were nutty. Big difference. And you can understand why, you know, blends evolved that way, and that you did need the mixture of malts to give the character that you looked for. You know, single malts are very, very one-dimensional that way. You know, they're governed by the taste of their new make, and then it's really how you mature them from there. So yeah, when you get several distillery new makes together, that's well, what you've got tonight, and you've got, you know, in your next session, you will see huge differences. I think it's nice to get back to the roots of it and see where, you know, the whiskies that you're buying just now, where they're coming from.
Yeah. So I guess for me, I'm assuming that would you agree that out of the two, we've only had two so far, and then obviously Dingle, and they have been three very different new makes. So from your perspective, what would you say might be the unique feature, or what do you think might make the Dingle new make, well, different to perhaps a lot of the ones we've got today from the likes of Scotland, and also Israel. But I guess what might make Dingle's new make different to, say, the Waterford one that we've got on the next session?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, you know, I think a lot of it comes down to the size of the stills, because the size of your mash tun and your size of your washbacks, they're sized together, and it probably doesn't matter whether it's a 3,000 litre washback or a 10,000 litre washback. You can probably by the end of the fermentation, you're going to have something that's similar. You know, especially if you know, with your wooden washbacks or your stainless steel. I think the big difference is, and I think you've seen it in the first two, is the size of the stills. You know, because that is where you're starting to form the flavour, especially in your wash still, because you're not just distilling in the wash still, you're cooking and baking as well, you know, with the steam coil. So I think that makes a big difference. And then it's not just your still, it's your distillation.
Hello.
And also your line arm as well, which either exaggerates the copper content or reduces it. So I think Dingle, to describe Dingle, I think we managed to hold a lot of character in the spirit, even though we triple distill, because we do distill slowly, and the stills are relatively small, and you know, our line arms slope down the way. So in some ways we're triple distilling for lightness, and then but we're in our actual stills we've got stills that will give a heavier character as well. So you've got all that wonderful balance, which at the end of the day brings out a unique spirit at the end, which is Dingle spirit. So yeah. You know, Waterford will be different altogether.
Yeah, I know. It was interesting. I think it was John might have mentioned the word gin. I mean, ultimately, that's pretty much arguably what we're virtually drinking tonight, isn't it? But I'm just curious whether anybody else had any comments around. I'm not a big gin drinker, so I don't know. I don't have a particularly big point of reference around gin. I don't know if anybody wants to sort of dive in with their viewpoint around what we've tried so far, and in particular around Dingle, where you believe that what you're tasting here almost has, brings back that memory of a very gin-like. Because I guess the reason why I'm asking this is because for me, I immediately agreed with John. I thought, right, actually, I see where you're coming from with that. It does almost feel like quite a heavily botanical gin, and it can't be botanicals in there, even though it kind of reminded me a little bit of that. Does anybody want to sort of put their viewpoint and shoot me down, or?
Can I just say something there? I only got the gin on the nose. As soon as you drink it, it's obviously a new make, but it was for me very ginny, floral, botanical on the nose. But obviously the palate was totally different again.
Yeah. Okay.
I think triple distillation. If you try to describe what it gives to a spirit, is it gives it a fragrance and almost a perfumed character, which you probably don't get quite so much of in a double distilled. The double distilled is more could be a little bit more earthy and more malt leading, rather than when you go that third distillation, you really are starting to separate and lighten the character and allow some of the softer elements to come through.
Yeah, it did have a very more refined sort of nose to it compared to the others.
And, you know, that's an added bonus for us at Dingle being a young distillery, because it means, you know, we're releasing whiskies just now that are 6, 7 years old, and that lightness and character does help. I think the whiskey matures quicker, or certainly takes on the character of the cask quicker. So, you know, you can get to an acceptable drinking whiskey at a younger age, whereas, you know, maybe with double distilled, you need to wait a little bit longer to get there. So yeah, it does certainly help in the situation that we're at just now.
Graham, have you done a lot of experimenting around the new make and what different yeasts might do to it and different fermentations? I mean, where you are now, you've obviously honed it to where you want to be right now, but did you have, you know, is that something you went through? You know, what was it that made you stick with what you've got now?
Yeah, I haven't done much with the yeast side of things and the fermentation hours, but to dabble with them, you need either a lot more equipment, or you need to take a different view. You know, like Glenallachie is a big distillery, but if you trim back production, you can then play around. You know, you've got room, time to maneuver. So on that side of things, I haven't done too much, but on distillation wise, we've done some peated spirit, and we've also done the peated spirit was double distilled as well. So certainly trying to see, you know, going to the other extreme basically to see how the Dingle spirit reacts to being double distilled and also reacts to being peated. And the other new spirit we have in Ireland is something called pot still, which has an element of malted barley in it and also an element of unmalted barley. So again, you know, there's that to play with and consider. So, you know, we've thrown in some rye and some oats into that mix as well. So there's a lot of flexibility there to play around. But yeah, I think for me, you know, the double distillation, triple distillation, and see how that goes. Unfortunately, you have to wait around a while to see the results. So the clock's ticking on me, so I need to. Hopefully, you know, we'll see some results. But yeah, no, it's interesting, great fun.
Yeah, I guess actually I've just noticed, Tim, you asked the question there. Tim, do you want to dive in? Because I think that's quite an interesting one. I was actually considering asking that question right now. So go for it, Tim.
You could have just read it, couldn't you, Carl?
No.
Do you find that you have much variation in the new make on a day-to-day basis, or is it quite consistent all the way through?
It's pretty consistent all the way through, you know, and probably having 3 distillations helps get more consistency, because you've got a third stage that sorts out anything that wasn't maybe quite right before. But it's a very laid back process at Dingle. You know, it's the west coast of Ireland, so nothing is pushed, and the distillation rate is very, very slow, and the production system that we have just lends itself to consistency, because everything is done at the same time every day at the same rate. So no, I haven't, to be honest, found too much of a change.
And John's just asked a question there around the barley. Do you want to ask it, John? I'm just trying to make sure that you all don't just listen to my whiny voice.
I know.
Yeah. My question was, Graham, are you also using Concerto? It seems to be the sort of mainstay at the moment of most distilleries.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It's the main one. You know, I think the barley varieties have kind of struggled. You know, I'm of an age where I remember Optic, which was around for a very, very long time, and a strong barley variety. There's nothing really been around that's taken over from there. You know, you see the varieties now, they're in for 2-3 years and then they're away again. So there's not been much progress there, which is maybe a good thing. There's nothing funny about the barley. There's nothing genetically modified. So yeah, it's concerto at the moment, but we're small here. We're not going to lead the direction of the barley varieties. We will take what's going at the time.
Graham, just on the subject of barley, have you considered as a distillery doing similar to others in terms of trying to, work with local farmers maybe to produce your own barley and actually, almost kind of like 100% dingle, whatever, have you considered that approach, or is that something on the cards?
Yeah, it's not something we've done. I mean, up till now, all the non-peated barley, malted barley we've purchased has been from Ireland. We did have to go to England, unfortunately, for our peated malted barley. But
oh, the Sassenachs!
some good things come out of England. So I've probably alienated the audience now, but no, for Dingle, it's probably not a great story for us because the Dingle distillery is based on the Dingle Peninsula, where there isn't 1 ounce of barley grown. It's full of sheep and cows and dairy. So yeah, it probably doesn't really make too much sense for us.
Fair enough. I guess now, I was going to ask you. Oh, sorry, who's that? Go for it.
Sorry, I apologise. So, Graham, obviously you came over from Scotland to go to Dingle. What would you say the main differences? I appreciate obviously doing some triple distilled. Obviously, Springbank do that for their Hazelburn, so that's not, there's nothing massive different. There's no real differences there. But would you say there are any great differences similar to what you were expecting?
It is. It's similar, to what I was saying. I said the big difference, I think I mentioned it before, is pot still. And if you haven't tasted pot still whiskey, then it's something worth investigating. It does have a different thing altogether. And maybe, if you repeat this again, Carl, we'll send some of the pot still new make across and some of the peated as well, so you can try that. But no, they're very similar. The rules in Ireland are a little bit softer on the cask use, so you just need to use something made of wood, which opens up quite a few options, I suppose. But no, really, making whiskey in Scotland, making whiskey in Ireland is very similar. I think that the hardest thing, trickiest thing for us is Dingle is so remote. We're an hour away from any major town, so actually trying to get tradesmen in and do work you've got to plan it well in ahead. It's a bit like being on one of the islands, to be fair. I think that's probably the easiest way to compare it.
Well, just on the subject of that, if these 2 sessions are successful, I already have a couple of other distilleries that are interested in taking part in session 3. So if these 2 go down well, Graham, I might be knocking on your door because it'd be lovely to compare a pot still new make. So thanks for that offer.
And another interesting thing would be if you could ask distilleries maybe to provide new make, but also maybe provide whiskey at 3 years old or 5 years old in a bourbon cask, so that you can then that you can compare like for like or unlike for unlike. It gives you a chance to see how the whiskies develop, because the hardest thing about a new make tasting is that it's not an easy thing to drink. It can go badly wrong quite quickly if you dive in. As I say, it's very educational, but it's not your usual whiskey tasting. So if you can throw in something there a little bit more mature, you can then at least maybe enjoy some of that as well.
Well, funnily enough, my next question was for everybody here, was just because I have tried a Dingle, but I haven't got a massive experience of it. Has anybody else tried any of the Dingle whiskies at all? Yeah? No? Okay, so we're all new customers, Graham. We're all going to have to get started on this. I
have to get them brainwashed.
Absolutely. But I was just curious because obviously the first one, White Peak, they're about to release, or they've got an 18-month whiskey available. And I think they're soon to release you know, an older whiskey. And obviously we all know to some extent Glenallachie, but I think arguably they are in this for the long term in terms of, you know, their aim, as Ben said, was to produce a new make for long-term maturation, whereas White Peak was exactly the opposite. Dingle, you're kind of more in the traditional space of, you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, where your intention is to produce not just relatively younger whiskies, but also for the long term as well. So I was just curious whether or not anybody had tried some of your expressions and could potentially see your new make profile still in that whiskey. But it looks like we don't have necessarily the experience to be able to answer that right now.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll have to come back.
It could be something, if you're interested, quite happy to join in on something and do maybe, you know, a Dingle through the ages thing would be, you know, interesting for me as well to get the feedback, you know, where, as I say, the oldest whiskey's now heading towards 8 years old.
Yeah.
So, you know, you could do.
We'd love to. I'll definitely have a chat about that.
And we could throw
I know I'm not part of this, Carl, but I did buy the third batch pot still the last time Graham and his wife were on.
That's right, yes.
And really nice, really nice. I can't go into great detail about it because I haven't got a very good palate, but it really was a different sort of whiskey as well. And as Graham's wife particularly advanced that one as the one I should buy. And it was different from the straightforward whiskey, the triple distilled. The pot still was really nice.
You know, not to go off on a tangent here, but pot still tends to add a creaminess and a spiciness to the whiskey. And again, I would say that does help at a younger age as well. So pot still, and we could do a tasting like that. We could have single malt at the same age as pot still, and you could compare them like for like. And I think you'll find that at this age, pot still is probably ahead of the single malt. But you know, I think that table will turn, you know, as the whiskey gets older. So yeah, lots of things to look at and investigate.
Oh, definitely. Okay, great stuff. I guess I don't know if anybody else would like to jump in. Oh, one thing I would say, Graham, is if it wasn't for COVID-19, I suspect Faye did such an amazing job of selling a visit to Dingle in terms of not just the distillery, but just going to Dingle, that we'd have all visited probably by now if it wasn't for COVID. Because it was, I mean, Faye should be on the Dingle tourist board because it was amazing.
To sell it to you, Dingle has a population of 2,000 people and there are over 30 pubs.
Just out of interest, actually, and this is a complete tangent, but I mean, how is the on trade given the COVID situation? I'm just curious how it's impacted especially when you're talking about 30 pubs in an area that probably relied heavily on
very, very, very tough. You know, the pubs, they call them this horrible term called wet pubs now, because in Ireland you were only allowed to open as a pub if you serve food, and you served a meal, a €9 meal. So that made there was a difference between, you know, a pub that served food and a pub that didn't. So the wet pubs only opened last Monday, so they've only been open a week, and obviously have all the social distancing to do. Dublin, they didn't even open in Dublin, so you can imagine, because Dublin's still got quite a high incident rate. So it's very similar to everywhere else, but you know, there is a big pub culture in Ireland, and it's definitely taken a hit.
Yeah. No, I can believe it. I was just
anyway.
Sorry, I went off on a tangent there. Let's raise the. We're all in a nice socially distanced pub tonight.
Exactly.
Right. Has anybody got anything else that they'd like to add, or do you want to jump in and give your opinion on these? I mean, I don't know how long Graham's going to be sticking around with us for, but, you know, dive in now if you've got questions. I have a feeling we might have Graham hopefully with us in the not too distant future again there. But for now, any questions before we move on to potentially the next one? No? Okay. Right. Well, Graham, thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thank you all for listening. Cheers. We'll see you in Dingle one day.
Absolutely. And Graham, obviously, you're welcome to stick around for as long or as short a time as you can. But thank you very much for coming along. It's been a pleasure as usual. And say hi to Faye.
I will do. Her wine glass is empty, I think.
Oh, something's happened. Thank you very much. So, yes, cheers. I'm going to go back to a little bit of Dingle. My tiny little bit of measure. Now, guys, we have some choices to make. That is nice. We have some choices to make because Toma is with us, and I don't believe we've got anybody from Dornoch or Lindosabi with us still. So I have a feeling they're not going to be able to make it, which is a bit of a shame. But there you go. I'm sure we'll still get some pleasure out of their new makes. So I guess the question is... Sorry, Toma, go for it.
Can I suggest something?
Yeah, go for it.
I suggest that you move to the Dornoch and Lindosabi next.
Are you sure, Toma? Because I'm aware you're an hour ahead of us as well, so it's getting late over there for you. I'm just...
If there isn't anybody from their distillery, so I guess it will be quicker than the last three.
Okay.
So we'll talk about it. You say...
Okay. If that's all right with you, Toma, I just wanted to be... I was trying to be polite.
The peated is not the peatiest whiskey new make that you will taste, but it's peated, so I think it should be the last one.
Okay, great. Thank you, Toma, and thanks very much for your understanding. So, in that case, we will now revert back to our lineup as sample number 2. So this is Dornoch, very kindly provided by Simon Thompson. Dive in, see what you think. By the way, is everybody enjoying it so far? I mean, is this okay? Is this kind of what you hoped for, expected? We all good? Good. I'm seeing plenty of thumbs up. That's good to hear. Rebecca, Ollie, you've been quiet. This is worrying. Are you all right? Yeah, there's some nods there. Okay. Good. Simon, hiya, Simon. Right, okay. What are we thinking? Again, man, I can't believe how different this is.
I was just going to, how you doing, Carol? I was just going to
Gary.
say, yeah, it's like, this almost reminds me of, I don't know if any of you guys have tasted, but the Thompson Brothers gin. They do a really good gin as well. And this, even just the first time I put my nose to it, I was like, wow, it's got like, it reminds me almost of that sort of real sort of herbaceous sort of thing.
Well, actually, I've just seen John's just mentioned sawmill, and that's not quite what I'm getting, but it's close. And I'm thinking, what the hell is that smell that I'm getting? I've not tried their gin, so I can't comment, but very, dramatically different.
I think to Gary's point, do the Thompson brothers not make their gin from barley new make?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's probably this that they just basically compound afterwards. They put the boiling ball on the top, I think, and then stick whatever botanicals in there. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's exactly the same spirit. And again, it's really got that herbaceous thing in there before they put any botanicals in.
Very creamy, and I'm getting a kind of orange rind to it.
Yeah.
I'm picking up the rind. Yeah.
Lovely.
It is, but how different is this? I'm genuinely blown away by how dramatically different all of these have been so far.
Yeah, it really breaks down the DNA of the distilleries. Do you not think? It's I've always kind of said that you can tell a hell of a lot from a distillery and their new make. I always think if they make a really good new make, then, you know, the chances are that in 4, 5, 6, 8 years, you know, you're going to have a very, very good spirit. Whereas if you start with a bad new make, you can put it in the best barrels in the world, but you're going to get a shit whiskey, you know. There's no guarantees with that at all, you know. But yeah, this is lovely.
Carl, I think, of course, you can see the DNA or the basic of each distillery, and it's very important. But two things that we see is the importance, first, of course, of the new make, but of the casks, and the fact that you all are really surprised about the changes between each new make shows us the importance of wood management and the casks in whiskey production, because that's what make most of the flavors of the whiskey, of the final product.
No, and I agree totally. I mean, we all know, you know, I'm fairly sure I'm not talking out of line here. I think we all agree that the vast, you know, sort of at least something in the region of 70% of the end product of the whiskey will come from the cask, and often it can be much more than that. So we all know how important that cask maturation and wood management is. But I think for me, and I think the reason why for me this was quite an important experiment was because I agree, Gary. I am absolutely convinced that sometimes the new make itself is almost downplayed just too much, because I think you're right. You know, I've tried some fantastic new makes and some poor new makes over the time. And you do kind of pick that profile out. You can ultimately pick out some degree of profile from that new make. Obviously, if it's a sherry bomb and it's massively sherried and it's spent, you know, 15 years in a highly active, you know, Oloroso cask, and you're going to get much less of that new make profile. But I still suspect that if it's good, oily, you know, if there's something good about the new make, it's going to get even better final whiskey out of that Oloroso 15, you know, that active cask, than if it was a poor new make. I genuinely...
I totally agree. I don't say that new make is not important, but it's interesting to see where it begins. But at the final...
I think from a distillery point of view, maybe as well, is you know, because you guys have got to think not about the product as a finished product when it comes out of the stills, but you're looking at a finished product as well, maybe from your guys' side in 4 or 5 years, 6 years time, you know, or in Scotland maybe in 10 years time. So the new make profile has to fit with the maturation plans, if you like, for 5 or 10 years. You know, is, you know, they're not thinking about how this tastes when it comes out of the still. They're thinking, how will that work with the barrels once they've sat in the warehouse for 5 years or 8 years? You know, is so yeah, they're always thinking one step ahead of the people like us.
You're right. It's designed to be drinkable after maturation, but it's surprisingly drinkable right now.
You're not wrong, Toma. You're genuinely not wrong. I'm surprised how much I'm enjoying, you know, the actual taste and the nose of all of the ones we've had so far, and the distinct differences. So yeah, I mean, I hope you guys are finding it as much fun as me. Loving it. I guess. Hi, Jeremy. By the way, thanks for joining us. Your set, I have got it made up, so it's coming over to you in Norway, okay? We need to get sorted for you.
Sounds great, thanks.
Sorry you can't have them tonight though.
Oh, no problem. It's been a bit of a disaster anyway so far. Bus drivers and strike and a puncture on the bike, so ended up a bit late.
Well, I hope you've got a good dram to make up for it.
Yep.
Good.
Cheers.
Somebody's asking what the ABV is of this. So the Dornoch is 60%. just so that you're aware. I think, so I don't know what you guys are thinking of this. Can I pick on somebody, or does somebody want to volunteer and save the rest of you? Anybody want to jump in? Just thinking, right. I'm going to pick on somebody if that's all right. Chris Chalk. Hi, Chris. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. This one's interesting. I found the nose way more interesting than the palate. The nose was giving me bags of, big, even a slight red wine vinegar, quite meaty, but the palate, to use the phrase we got from the chap from Glenallachie, does seem to be made for aging. Maybe it's not quite as much on the palate as I expected.
That's interesting, because obviously Dornoch don't necessarily have the benefit of massive company behind them and all the rest of it. In some respects, I can definitely understand why the likes of White Peak have designed their whole approach around trying to make distillate that they can mature and get out the door relatively quickly. And you would almost imagine Dornoch to have that same approach, but maybe they don't. Maybe they are very much looking at this in the long term. I'm not particularly familiar. It sounded almost like Ian Love and Gary, you guys might know Dornoch certainly probably a lot better than I do.
I do know they recently moved, I think, premise. So originally they were in an old fire station, was where they first started. But I could be wrong on this, but I think they may have moved just recently or expanded just recently, obviously because they're now doing the gin and the whiskey production. But again, don't quote me on that. It may just be that they maybe bought more warehouse space or expanded, or I'm not entirely sure. But they are doing their own independent labellings as well, as for they do their own bottlings, which I don't know if any of you guys have tasted some of them, but the ones I've had have been fantastic.
The Thompson brothers.
Yeah.
Thompson brothers, yeah.
They done a 4-year-old grain, or was it a 4-year-old? Yeah, I think it was a 4-year-old single grain just recently, which was, I think you can still maybe get it in the Royal Mile whiskies, but it was fantastic. Really, really interesting stuff. So yeah, like you say, they might go down the road of let's just keep doing the independent bottles and doing the gin until we've got a little bit older stock. But I think I agree as well. It's to me it tastes like it's maybe meant for being in a barrel a little bit longer than say the White Peak as well, which are going for a get it in, get it matured, get it out sort of layout. Is this to me kind of seems like it may go into first fill bourbon barrels for 8 to 10 years. Something like that. Maybe, who knows? They maybe got other ideas. There's a lot of guys I see doing young whiskey in STR casks. Seems to be a trend at the moment. As you can put a 3-4-year-old whiskey into an STR cask or bourbon and STR cask, and it seems to come out fairly well rounded. So. Yeah, it'll be interesting, certainly interesting to see what they do. But I mean, I don't think it's going to be big batches anyway. So it may be another Daft Mill scenario where everybody's clambering over each other to try and get a bottle when it finally comes out.
Yeah. One thing I would do, actually, I don't know if anybody's still got some of the neat Glenallachie. Go back to it and just see if you get like a totally different nose from the Glenallachie than the first time round, because I'm actually trying to decide so far which of the new makes I like the most, because I tend to agree, Andy. Andy Casey, you mentioned that you really like this one. This is your favorite so far, and I was kind of thinking the same thing. But then I went back to the Glenallachie, and actually it's just totally different, and I'm trying to decide between those two. I think one of those is my favorite so far. Either this one or the Glenallachie.
Definitely this one for me. I don't know what it is about it, whether I just really, it just fits my taste profile. To me, this one feels the closest to being whiskey of them all. It doesn't feel like it needs as much time in a cask. I'd compare it with the Glenallachie, but I drank all that, so I can't.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because I would say that this is the most like, almost like a liqueur. I think this almost needs like layering in a mixer somewhere for me, because it's very reminiscent of much more that gin angle that we've already discussed. I just went back and re-smelt the Glenallachie glass, and I'm getting like what I think of in my head is like cellar malt, which is like, so after uni and during uni when I was a student, I worked in a lot of pubs, and there's a real background smell to like the beer cellar if you've got open ales and stuff like that. So like there's this real like kind of background malty kind of hoppy kind of like grain cellar kind of thing going on, which is really interesting.
Yeah. Has everybody else used an approach of watering down some of their new make and comparing and contrasting, or are you?
Yeah, so I'm just I've poured all of mine out just before we started. Poured them all neat, just a half sample of each, and then I'm just sort of smelling neat first, taste neat, and then just add a if it needs it, a drop of water. But you know, just to pick up, because I know you'd said, I think it was on the first one you said, Carl, that you felt like you'd kind of drowned it a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
I think I've done it with all of them.
Because I did see your video just before we started, you know, and I'd seen you'd poured them out, and I thought, that's a brave way to go, you know. It's because I think
that you did it, Carl, because I was lucky enough to go to Loch Lomond and get into the actual lab where they do the quality control.
Cool.
And the quality control's done by a little old lady who looks like your nana with a lab coat on, and all of the new make spirits, and they have some very high ABV stuff in there because they've got coffee stills and stuff. Are all watered down to about 25% for her to do quality control on them.
Yeah. Well, so, that was where I got this. I mean, that was I was thinking, because I know from previous discussions with some of the guys we've had on, the likes of Billy Walker, for example. He says he does most of his sampling at 20% thereabouts, and a lot of people do the same. In fact, I was on a tasting the other night with the Lakes Distillery. So Deval was saying he does a similar sort of thing, uses around 20% ABV for nosing. Not necessarily, well, I think he did sample it as well, but that 20% seems to be somewhere a lot of people in the industry use.
That said, I agree with you. It killed the first one.
Yeah.
It didn't kill the Glenallachie at all. That was actually quite nice, watered down that way. Probably because it's such a bigger, bolder flavor profile.
Yeah.
So you kind of, it did give a real eye opener to. I mean, what was it? Nearly 70%. So it was almost at like whiskey strength if you 50% diluted it. So yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, because the Glenallachie was 69.4%. So you're right. You know, even bringing that down to half, that 35%, that's not far off. Being a whiskey. Well, other than the maturation. Okay, grand. What are we thinking? Shall we move on? Are we happy with that? Is that good so far? Any other comments we want to make before we move on?
Is Dornoch bottling yet, or have they not released their first? Do we know?
I don't believe they've
nothing yet.
They've released yet.
Not yet. No, they will release a few. They will release very soon. I think it was the end of August, end of September they were talking about, but most of them I think will go to the initial investors. But there will be some limited bottles for a few shops, but I guess it's going to be a nightmare to get a hold of.
Classic. Yeah.
Okay. Grand. Well, in which case, why don't we dive into number 3? And this is Lindor's Abbey. So number 3, guys. I definitely don't want to have a situation where you feel rushed or anything like that. So Hopefully it doesn't feel rushed, and we're definitely spending enough time on each of them. So, but again, you know, you guys dive in if you think we're going too slow or too fast, or I'm rabbiting on too much, because that wouldn't be a first.
I was curious what everybody else is, if anybody's drinking sort of beers along with these, or if folk just having a glass of water in between these, or.
I did have a beer, but I haven't even opened it.
Well, I went for something really oddball, but the reason behind this was because, again, I tend to find a lot of new makes, you get like quite that sort of foam bananas thing on a new make. So I found this.
Wow.
I found this in the shop. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's a banana bread beer. It's, yeah, it's very banana-y.
It says what's on the tin, eh?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. But I did buy a bottle of Newcastle Brown as well, so.
Have you ever tried whiskey or new make in Newcastle Brown?
This is a first Newcastle Brown and new make pairing for me. Yeah. I've not worked to that yet, actually. I've not worked up to the Newcastle Brown yet, but yeah, that's next on the list, I think.
If you add them together or add whiskey, that's a dog's nose cocktail, and it's fantastic.
A dog's nose? I have never heard of that.
I've never heard of that either.
Goes back to Elizabethan times.
Wow. I will definitely check that.
There's going to be a big explosion in Nuki Brown sales in Newcastle. Don't normally buy the stuff here.
Well, the best one.
Not produced in Newcastle anymore.
Heard a great one recently. We done a tasting with Julie Hamilton, who's one of the brand reps for Elixir Distillers, and we done a blind Elixir tasting. And she was telling me one of her favourite drinks in the world was Ardbeg 10 and chocolate yuzu milk together.
Wow.
Yeah, she said, but it can't be any chocolate milk. It has to be that kids.
It has to be yazoo. Yeah.
And you have to shake it really hard, but put a shot or two of Ardbeg 10 in there and shake it really hard, and you've got a drink made for the gods, supposedly.
Do you know what? I had I think it was last year. I had ice cream that was salted caramel with Lafroig in it.
Nice.
And it worked really, really well. So I can kind of believe the whole chocolate milk and Ardbeg thing. Though
I'm up for trying anything once, you know.
Well, to be honest, I don't want to be sort of biased here or anything, but anything mixed with Ardbeg or Lafroig is going to be good in my books.
Try Lafroig quarter cask with a Guinness.
Oh, yeah, brilliant.
That's a dog's nose.
We'll need to try that out.
Sorry, we had a question about the ABV of this one. This is 63.5 for the Lindors Abbey.
Has anybody tried the other Lindors, the Aquavite?
No.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I found it an interesting experiment, but really didn't like it.
So one of my pals I used to work with Andy Lenny, who was the one of the first sort of brand reps for the company, partly because he grew up sort of along the road from the distillery. But I remember chatting with him after he'd sort of left the company. He now works for White the Kai or sort of Dalmore / Fettercairn / Jura. But I remember talking to him and he was saying, by God, it's a hard sell. You know, and he comes from a very good sort of cocktail background, so he'd worked in a lot of good cocktail bars in Edinburgh and things like that, and that was kind of the angle that he took, was to try and sell it down as an ingredient to cocktails, because trying to sell it to whiskey folks, he was like, mate, it's the hardest sell in the world. And I can see why, you know. It's nice, it's a nice drink, but it's very much more like a Christmas liqueur rather than trying to sell it to whiskey drinkers. So yeah, this is quite a nice change.
It is quite pleasant. I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to kind of pigeonhole it to some extent, which is bad of me in many ways, but it definitely isn't up there for me in terms of my favorite new makes. But I definitely, again, it's very distinct. It's very different from any of the ones we've had so far. But it's kind of it's kind of like a mix between the Glenallachie and the first one from White Peak for me. I kind of get a bit of both in it. I don't know if anybody else wants to kind of give their view or opinion on it. Anybody want to jump in? Fruit or juicy, fruity chewing gum. Cheers, Steve. I'm not getting the chewing gum bit, but juicy, fruity, kinda.
I think it's the Juicy Fruit brand.
I
Yeah.
didn't spell fruit properly. That was just my fat fingers on the keyboard. Or it could be something to do with the 5 new makes we've just had. But yeah, I'm the opposite of Carl. I think this and the Glenallachie were arguably my favourites. Different. I just think the amount of fruit in this one, I really like that.
I think this one feels most balanced, and I can't tell if that's just because it doesn't lead too strongly in any one way, if that makes sense. After the Glenallachie and the like the Dingle and the Dornoch, I feel like this is kind of somewhere neutral. Maybe I'm just getting sort of like a tired palate. I don't know.
That actually might fit with kind of where I'm kind of thinking. I'm not, when I was saying I'm trying to kind of pigeonhole it or categorize it in some way, I'm kind of, you probably worded it a bit better than I did, because I'm finding I'm struggling to kind of
Which one is this? Which one are we drinking now?
So this is the Lindor's Abbey, number 3.
Right. I've been drinking it, and it gets a little bit better with a bit more water.
Yeah.
I'm feeling.
I haven't tried it with the water yet.
I'm not a big fan of adding water, but that one seems to work for me. Because I thought it was very harsh initially. My nose is shot at the minute, but I can't smell anything. But I think it adds to it for the water.
I'm just trying it now with my massively watered down.
For me, this one's like the Glenallachie. It's kind of quite bold and handles water quite well, like you're saying there, Tim. I was amazed that it's as low an ABV as you said it was. Not because it feels too hot, but because it's got so much punch.
Actually, with the watered down version for me is nicer. For me, I'm enjoying that more. What I did like about it, though, the neat version, of it, was that it had quite a viscous, oily kind of mouth coating to it, which felt a bit heavier than the others that we've had tonight. But again, it could be that our palates are just getting shot, or mine is. Nice. Actually, with the water, it's very nice. I'm enjoying that much more. Right.
As well, anybody that's interested, I think Lindor's are still selling casks. I'm pretty sure they're still on the go just now, and I think you can pick between sizes of casks as well.
Yeah. So worth checking that out if you're interested in getting a cask.
Yeah, or if you guys, somebody's got like a sort of club and want to chip in, sort of, 10 ways or something like that. It's always a good way to break the course.
Yeah. Well, what we're thinking so far, because I suspect that we're going to have something a little different, a new curveball thrown at us the minute we start with milk and honey.
Yeah.
So in a good way, by the way, Toma, I'm meaning that very much in a good way. So before we do dive into milk and honey, what's everybody thinking? In terms of a favourite, just for your personal palate, who thinks maybe number 1 was their kind of favourite? And purely from a new make perspective, what new make have you enjoyed the most so far? So stick your hand up if you think number 1 is perhaps showing the greatest for you. So we've got 1 vote, definitely. Malcolm, you're definitely behind number 1. I'm not sure if Peter, are you sticking your hand up in the way just because? Oh no, he's talking. He's doing other things. Is anybody else thinking? Right. Okay. Number 2. So number 2 is the Dornoch that we've the one just before. What's everything in? So Tim, I think that's a Tim. Ian, you're suggesting that one's your favorite so far. Okay. So tasting. So nose 1 and 5. This is from Rebecca. Nose 1 and 5. Palate 4 and 5. Yeah. See where you're coming from. Number 3. Who reckons? Oh, Steve. So number 3 is the one we're just on now. The Lindors Abbey. Number 4. So number 4 being the Glenallachie. So Max, Mark. I think that's Dave. Yeah. Okay, so, I think we've got a few on that. Oh, and Gary there, sorry, and Ross. And then number 5 was the Dingle, new make. So Henry there, Davo, yeah, Callum and Kate. You guys agree? Normally we'd have at least one of you saying 1 and the other one. I mean, come on, guys. You're just doing this to be kind. Okay. So, I mean, quite a split there, actually. I mean, it's again, very surprising. There hasn't been one that's kind of leapt out, and been head over heels, sort of seen as the favorite. Didn't like the Dingle at all. Peter, what do you want to elaborate on that?
Sorry, it was like a paint stripper. Yeah. Well, I don't know whether it was mine, whether it was my palette or whatever, but yeah, it was just... Yeah, it was like licking Dulux.
And did you try that both? Was that just neat, or was that both neat and with a bit of water?
With a bit of water, well, it calmed itself down. It went from like matte to emulsion.
Get off the fence and tell us what you really think.
It was okay. It was all right.
Don't backtrack now, Peter.
Yeah, well, you know what I mean. Yeah, it just definitely kind of wasn't for me. Whereas the Glenallachie, you could see where it's going to go somewhere, but yeah, right now not as drinkable. The kind of the White Peak, just really approachable to start off with. Whereas at the start, the smell was like, oh, I'm not sure about this. But when you tasted it, it kind of was really approachable. Haven't quite done the kind of 2 milk and honey ones yet. But yeah, that certainly the White Peak was definitely, for me, very pleasant. I will go
I'm fun in there.
Yeah, but Peter, if you did milk and honey, that would have been cheating.
Okay, they've made back and bird before.
I'm just another one. Andy there because he's right. So let's.
I can ask just.
Oh, sorry, Dave. Go on.
That's right. So I think your question is an interesting one, and let me explain the reason why. Because I've answered your question based on how have I enjoyed the new make this evening, as in which could I see myself actually physically drinking, not as a session, because I appreciate it, 60+%. No one's going to really be able to keep up with that. But I think the question, if you re-ask the question in 2 ways. If you ask the question, which do you think is the easiest one on your palate to drink? And then ask the question, which do you think will taste great in 3, 5, 7 years' time after it's had that influence? I think you'd probably get a different answer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and this is why, for me, it's kind of trying to focus entirely on the new makes for me at the moment. And obviously you guys can approach it in a very different way. But for me, this tonight was very much about what does the new make offer, and then maybe in future we can start to consider just how good or how much that new make can then we've all right. Let's reverse it a bit. We've had the likes of some of the independent bottlers come on, and in particular, I believe it was Ed Lee from Single Cask, really highlighting that what they want to achieve is they do not want to do the big sherry bombs. They genuinely want to, highlight the profile of the distillery. So that was their approach. They want, Ed's approach was, if he has a particular distillery bottling, he wants to mature it and make sure that he doesn't lose that original profile of the distillery. And that for me is something, what we're seeing here is almost the kind of, well, we're seeing the very raw material that every distillery is then going to produce, work with, and how they develop that. But I genuinely do think, going back to the conversation we had earlier, Gary, as well, and I think you sort of highlighted this and as well, if I remember rightly, the new make does definitely have an impact throughout, every release that a distillery.
Absolutely.
So what we're seeing here is perhaps that, the very early days, and being able to compare it, I guess, like Graham suggested, where we have, if we could try to get like a 3-year-old malt from the same distillery, and then and be able to see how it develops. I don't know if anyone's done that kind of tasting before.
Yeah, one of the great ones I had, I was lucky enough, I got sent a sample from Cotswolds, actually. They sent me a little 200ml sample of new make, and so I compared that with their first kind of general release, the Odyssey Barley, I think it was 2014 Odyssey Barley. And comparing those two, like you say, you can absolutely trace that new make to their finished product 4 years down the line, or whatever it was. It was unmistakable that you could pick that DNA from the new make out in the finished product.
But I don't know, Gary, I know I've tried a few new makes over my sort of, to add to my experience over the years with whiskey so far. But I am finding that, like tonight, I think it's genuinely opened up my mind to new make far more than I'd originally thought I was. And I thought I was relatively open to new make. But it's incredible how I think this is a great education for me, because I can genuinely appreciate now. I think if I was to go in and try some of my whiskies from some of these distilleries, I suspect I would get a little bit more from that. And I don't know, I hope that, it's not just me, to get these, this new make to try. I'm genuinely hoping that I can get a little bit more out of the whiskies that I try from those distilleries as well.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's the same thing as like I've often done, going into like a really nice sort of Spanish bar and trying as many different sherries as I can find. And again, just to try and get a bit more background on what that influence from those sherries is on the finished product of the whiskey. Because at the end of the day, if you try every kind of asset or every facet of the whether it be the maturation process or whether it be, the new make spirit or everything else, it gives you a better sort of whole round sort of idea of, where they start, where they go, what works with them, what doesn't, So, for instance, maybe somebody like, Ben Riach is a very, very good example, where they had tons and tons of different expressions. They had peated, they had unpeated, they had triple distilled, they had every type of cask. And again, not all of those are going to float everybody's boat, so finding kind of what works and what doesn't work, for me personally, I found, Ben Riach and in the early days, Bruichladdich, both kind of put me off at that time because they just put so many expressions out. And I don't know if it was partly my bad luck as well, but certainly on the Bruichladdich side of things, in the early days when it was just kind of reopened again, and I maybe just had a couple of Duff bottles of Bruichladdich at the time, or it might have been the fact that they were firing out. I mean, I'm sure Jim will highlight this at some point as well, and maybe not say it in exactly the same way, but it certainly felt to me like when they took over Bruichladdich Distillery, they were left with a lot of stock and a lot of good age stock, but a lot of it had been left in really, really poor casks. And I think that's kind of where the business strategy was, to put a lot of these into, like sort of series of like 6 bottles, so they done like the Rocks, the Waves, or they done like the Link series with all the golf courses. The idea being, and again, this is just my opinion, but it felt to me like what they wanted was they wanted to sell the stuff off and people would buy the full collection. in the hope that maybe they wouldn't open all of those bottles and try them, because they'd probably find that some of them were pretty duff whiskey in those bottles, you know, but they would buy them because it was a collector series and they would want to have the whole collection. And it was a good way to get rid of some of the old stock so they could get their heads down and start, you know, putting stuff in. You also had Jim McEwen at the same time, which, you know, everybody knows him as a cask whisperer, you know, for a good reason. What that guy does with casks is something magical, you know, and he re-racked a ton of stuff in Bruichladdich warehouses, you know, and moved it all around into different wine barrels, first fill barrels, you know, bourbon barrels, everything else, and kind of rescued a lot of the spirit, you know. But I do feel that, you know, that it was the same kind of thing with Benriach, you know, there was just too many expressions, and it was, you know, if you don't find the one that you really like near the beginning, then it could put you off that distillery when there's so many other distilleries and so many other things going on that, you know, you could easily just forget about them and not go back to them for another few years, possibly, you know?
Yeah. No,
sorry, Carl, I was going to say, I think it's a really interesting point about Bruichladdich, because even now with their modern classic laddie, if you read the barcode off the back, it tells you which barrels you've got in your bottle. And, you know, you've got sort of like second fill bourbon into first fill bourbon into this, into that, into the other. And I'd always assumed it was because they were trying to basically try and level the playing field, where they've still potentially got a huge amassed collection of barrels and not all of them are going to be as good. But your point, Gary, is sort of, I wanted to bring it back to what Dave was asking, which is sort of, what do you think the future will be? You know, sort of like, what do you like most tonight, and what do you think is going to be really good in legal whiskey, sort of, you know, what's it going to be like in 5 years? I think that's the reason that I can't answer that question in long, is because it takes a really, really good new make spirit, and then requires someone to come along and do the cask whisper a bit and put it in a really decent set of wood, and then test it and say it's actually really, really good, versus, I don't know, I mean, White Peak Distillery, no offense to them, Lindor's Abbey, both like smaller, newer players. What is the likelihood that they're going to be able to get the kind of cask quality that someone like Glenallachie or, you know, Glendronach would have been able to, a la old school Billy Walker? It is a roll of the dice, I think, because you're taking what is quite nice new make spirit and sort of hoping that if you did a 10-year bottle, that it's going to be great in a decade.
Yeah, if you get the casks.
Yeah. But I think that one thing that I don't know whether you'd agree, you guys, is whether or not I do go back to this idea. I think it might have been you, Gary, that mentioned as well about the fact that if you have got good new make, then you are giving yourself the best possible chance. And you can perhaps be forgiven to an extent that maybe the cask isn't quite as good, but it still gives you a chance of getting something decent at the end. Whereas I think if you have even a slightly better cask, but it's still not great, but you've got poor new make, I suspect you're in a worse position. So yeah, I guess, you know, but it'd be interesting to do that sort of comparison. I know some distilleries do allow you. I mean, I know one of the early tastings we did face-to-face a few years ago was when Annandale were just sort of releasing some, well, we did their new makes, and we did, I think it was a spirit of 2.5 years. So we did peated and unpeated, new make and so on. But you for me, the you know, even at the 2.5 year, you couldn't really, you didn't detect the new make. It was almost kind of different stuff. Yeah. So I don't know if that's been because they've had really active casks to get it to that 2.5 years. So you kind of lost a bit of their new make profile, or a lot of that new make profile for me anyway. But also, I was in an earlier stage of my whiskey experience, so I can also put it down to being green as grass. Anyway,
so it's an interesting point about whether you'd be able to get good casks or not. I don't know how much casks cost and what makes a good or a bad cask, but I understand that first fill bourbon casks are maybe not all equal, but they are plentiful because they come from the bourbon industry in America. So I would
Well,
argue
that might change
a
very
good
soon.
remake
Yeah,
from
yeah.
a first fill bourbon cask, then you're going to get a better whiskey out of that than you would if it wasn't a good new make, because we're all familiar with bourbon cask finishes.
Yeah,
Whereas if you're
it's
talking about
definitely
sherry
more.
cask finishes and mixes like that, then yeah, that can affect things massively.
But for me, I think the White Peak is going to be an ideal new make for white wine casks, perhaps red wine casks. I think, but I think it would be. I don't know about you guys, but I almost get the feel that it would be destroyed by a big Oloroso cask, for example. So I think it's horses for courses. If they can find a reasonable vineyard, for example, then they might be hitting a very sweet spot, maybe for me and maybe a bunch of consumers that would really like that stuff. So I guess it comes down to what the new make, because actually that is a point, isn't it? If you were producing the White Peak new make, for me, that's what I'd then go and do with that new make. I wouldn't perhaps be even trying to duplicate what other distilleries are doing and going down the sherry route or anything. I'd perhaps pick what I thought might be the best route for my distillery, and it might be to get a name for myself in white wine,
So,
matured whiskey.
To your point there, so if you look at the lakes, they've gone almost exclusively sherry. They make no bones about that at all. I'm going to disagree with you on what you just said there. I think the White Peak needs suburban. I think it needs that kind of vanilla, that softening, if you will, to bring it around, because I think white wine can make it a bit acidic and quite harsh. And I think it has some of those tones already. It's a great new make, don't get me wrong. But I guess to come back to your point about if you don't start with a good, if you don't have good new make, if you don't have good barrels, if you think of it as a relay team, if you've got, Usain Bolt in your team as such in for a relay, then you're probably going to end somewhere in the midfield, irrespective of however good the rest of your runners are. But if all of your runners are Usain Bolt, then you're going to win by a country mile. If they're all crap runners like me, got dodgy knees, then you may as well not even bother taking part. So I guess I bring it back to a very quick summarization. If you look at it that, unless you have the right components at the right places, and given the fact that, broadly speaking, all of the distilleries that we'll taste this evening, the process is the same, virtually. The way in which they do things is slightly different. Maturation, stills, line arm angles, you name it. There's a whole bunch of different factors that go into the end liquid. And what you're seeing is actually what is the sum of all those parts? What does that actually mean? And you would never be able to recreate it. It's impossible. A distillery can't even recreate it day to day virtually, or batch to batch. It's impossible. And that's the reason why when you get the large distilleries out there, they're always vatting stuff, because that's the only way to generate a consistent taste profile.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I was going to touch on as well was just, back to the sort of casks and the sourcing is, you tend to see a lot just now, or I'm certainly seeing a lot of new distilleries at the moment, because they can't get a hold of the sherry casks and they can't go to the big guys like Buffalo Trace because they're only a small distillery, that nobody's heard of, that a lot of the new distilleries are leaning towards red wine casks now. Because these wineries haven't been tapped just yet from the whiskey industry anyway. Nobody's been taking those barrels as yet. Whereas even the sherry industry now, unless you're, well, obviously you've got the really, really top guys like Sir Macallan and such who basically own their own bodegas. Then you've got the next ones down, like some people like Tamdu and things like that, who have got long-standing family relationships between a bodega in Spain and Jerez and obviously, their distillery in Tamdu. So there's always that kind of like that relationship, and even sort of like looking at now, a really good example is Rasi Distillery, who have sort of formed a relationship with a vineyard. I think is it North Italy? I think it is. It's some Italian vineyard that they've kind of paired up with. And even in the very, very early days, Rasi were actually selling on their website. You could buy the wines bottles of wine from the vineyard that they're actually now using the barrels for. So yeah, there's got to be that sort of that heavy relationship, you know, and I think it is. I think you touched on, Carlo, as well. Is I don't think you know, bourbon barrels may be in plentiful supply at the moment, but even sort of, you know, in the last 10 years, the price of a bourbon barrel, you know, trade-wise is doubled or almost tripled in price, you know, is for somebody just to buy a standard bourbon barrel. I remember talking to guys 10 years ago and they would pay 50 quid for a bourbon barrel. You know, they're now about £150 a barrel. Your sherry butts are crazy. I think they're now about £500 a barrel or something like that, you know.
Well, and Gary, one of the things that could change dramatically is if the new law comes in North America where they're able to reuse the barrel.
Yeah.
If they're able to do even a second fill from that barrel, that impact on the availability of bourbon barrels for, you know, potentially hitting a supply chain of at least, you know, 5 years. And impact is that second fill bourbon barrel going to have on the whiskey industry when they become available? And, you know, the whiskey industry is then using second fill bourbon barrels. What impact is that going to have on the blends, the vattings, you know, that they've been doing? Anyway, I must interrupt because I'm very conscious that we have Milk and Honey with us. We have Toma with us. And I know we're already into sort of is it 10:30 your time now, Toma?
It's 11:30 p.m.
11, sorry. So you're 2 hours ahead. Look, I'll tell you what, Toma, we'll crack on and we'll get you in now. So we are now going into sample number 6. So sample number 6 is the Milk and Honey new make. Now this is the unpeated new make. Number 7 is the peated Milk and Honey new make. So I don't know, Toma, if you think it would be a good idea to maybe almost do a side-by-side of them while we're doing the nosing.
No, I prefer you taste first the unpeated and
right.
put something in the glass, then you can compare between them.
Right.
I'll tell you just a little bit about the production process. If you want, we have a really nice distillery tour on YouTube. I'll send you the link so you can see it later. Because the videos in Zoom aren't really, it's not running good.
No worries, thank you.
So the barley for the unpeated comes from Mantons in England. So it's from you. We do a 1 ton batch, 1 ton barley each batch. And we have semi-lauter mash tun. So the wort goes really clear to the fermentation tanks. And the fermentation, it's up to 72 hours. So it's not so long, but it's not really short. It's somewhere in between. The yeast that we use is Fermentis M1. So we really like to experiment in everything. So sometimes we use other yeast, but usually the most common new make that what you taste now is the M1 Fermentis. And we do have temperature control for the fermentation tanks. We must have it because of the really hot climate that we produce the whiskey in. So we keep the temperatures of the fermentation between 30 and 33 degrees. That will produce the best fruity notes that you probably taste. Then we have double distillation. The wort still is 9,000 liters, and it gives it the wash is about 8%, and after wort still distillation, it's around 33 degrees alcohol. Then we do second distillation in the 3,500 liters, really pretty new spirit still. And the degree of both stills of the line arm is 45 degrees down. So most of the oils that reach the top of the still will go inside the new make. That will cause really oily, nice oily new make. But because of the aging in really hot climate, we have to cut pretty high. So the cut is from 80 to 70, and that's because we don't want a lot of faints inside the new make. because faints needs oxidation during the maturation period, and we don't have a lot of time for oxidation. We are maturing for sometimes even 3, but 4 or 5 years mostly. So the cut is pretty high, 80 to 70. Just for example, a lot of Scotch distilleries cut at 65, even 55. It depends which distillery. What else? Do you have any questions?
Just to answer the question, I think somebody asked what the ABV of the new make is. It's 63.5%, and it's the same for the peated new make at 63.5.
Both of the new makes are 63.5. That's the cask proof. We cask at 63.5 up to 65. So that's the ABV that it goes inside the cask.
Definitely getting that red fruits. Whoever mentioned red fruits.
Really fruity. You do get the maltiness, I guess. I don't have it in front of me.
Bit spicy as well. The ABV kind of shines through a bit on it, for me anyway.
I have to say, I really like this. Just neat. I could actually drink this as a normal.
It's
spirit,
much
you know?
nicer neat for me as well. Again, I think my stupidity of adding so much water has just demolished this in many respects, because I love it neat, much nicer.
Yeah, it's got a real sort of nice creaminess.
Sorry, Gary.
Yeah, really nice creaminess to it, but it's still got that big fruity. It's almost like a fruit salad with cream.
Well, I don't know if anybody else has seen the legs that this thing's producing as well.
Yeah.
It's got a hell of a thick kind of feel to it.
Yeah, real viscous.
Actually, guys, we are really lucky to have one of our senior distillers here also. So, Johnny, if you have anything to add, you're really welcome.
Hi, Johnny.
Hey guys, how you doing? Sorry for not having a video available.
No worries.
Oh,
thanks for joining us.
No, not really. Don't have anything to add. Just enjoying the show. You know, it's just a great conversation and great spirits too.
A lot to learn.
Yeah.
May I just ask, guys, how long do you allow this to ferment for? If it's obviously temperature controlled, I appreciate your concern about the overall heat in the mash room as such. How long do you keep it going for? I can't remember.
For up to 72 hours. Sometimes in the hot season, right now it's around 40 degrees outside Celsius. So sometimes we cut the fermentation before 72 hours if it reaches the parameters that we want. But usually it's around 72 hours.
So it's almost like the opposite of in Scotland, as we're trying to keep the heat in, to get the yeast going, whereas you guys are trying to keep it cool to stop it overflowing.
Yeah, we keep it below 33 degrees.
Toma, just remind everyone on the call, I appreciate we've spoken a few times, but just remind everyone on the call what your angel share is.
Excuse me, again?
Your angel share.
People,
so we will lose around 10 to 12% a year from the spirit you are tasting now after it goes into casks. So it's huge, but we have few maturation sites spread around Israel, and one of them is at the Dead Sea.
I was just going to say that you've got very different angel share there, haven't you?
Yeah, so there we have around 25% a year. So
that's just bonkers.
We don't keep the cask for 3 years over there. We just send them for 1 year and then bring them back to the distillery.
Tom, I apologise if I'm about to mix you up with Galani, but do you have any cave cave resting, or is it all Dead Sea or up where you are now?
We have more than the Dead Sea. We have around four places right now.
And what are the warehouses you're using, Toma? Are they sort of racked, palletized? Are they dunnage?
I didn't understand.
So the warehousing, you know, is it how does the warehousing work? Is it?
Oh, so it's a traditional type. It's not racked. We have 4 levels of traditional type, traditional way storing the casks.
Cool. And is that on the video as well?
Yes, yes. You can see everything on the video. It's really detailed. I'll send it now.
Cool.
Brilliant. Thank you.
And you can look for M&H Distillery on YouTube, and you have few, maybe 3 or more videos around different things.
Brilliant. So, do you want to dive in with their feedback on this? Oh, sorry, Dave.
No, that's right. I was just going to say, I was actually going to give some feedback, Carl. So you kind of jumped me on the ball there. Been a big fan of yours, as you know, for a while now. And it's the first time I've actually tried the new make, and it's really nice. You can see the spirit coming through. I appreciate, obviously, it can't spend too long in the cask, just given how warm it is and the conditions that you specifically have. And it's fantastic to see the quality of the spirit still coming through, but it also gets that. I appreciate I'm not talking the 3-year-old whiskey, but it gets some of the characteristics of the cask as well. So once again, Slanger, doing a great job, lads.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, this is actually my.
Sorry, Gary. Go on.
Yeah, this is actually my first experience of any milk and honey at all. So I've still not had any of the sort of finished single malt yet. So I'm very impressed with the new make. Certainly the unpeated that's my favourite out of the 6 so far. Anyway, definitely.
Mm. Yeah, I was just going to say, Rebecca's just mentioned about the pomegranate cask.
That sounds my sort of thing.
Oh, yeah, yes. Well, when we did the milk and honey tasting, the virtual tasting, it was certainly one of the earlier virtual tastings we did. That pomegranate cask was absolutely to die. And absolutely, I mean, totally unique. I don't think I've ever tried anything quite like it. So if you do get a chance to try the pomegranate, and I think the one we had was a specific single cask, but I think you're releasing regular pomegranate.
So we will have a 3rd-tier series called Apex, and it's cask strength, small batches, and single cask. And the first release will go by the end of this year, but I assume the first release will go all to the US, and then we'll release in January or February things to Europe and the other markets.
And will the pomegranate be in there by any chance?
Yes, there will be pomegranate cask.
Good. That's good to hear. Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, unless anybody's got anything else.
But you do have the boutique that Andrew just bought. You do have it available on Master of Malt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bought that and I only opened it about 2 weeks ago because the one that I think we tried in the tasting was matured in the Dead Sea location. Yeah. And I think that was only 1 year and 1 month old, and it blew me away. So I impulsively bought this one, and then I think you said that one was matured. There it is there. Dave's holding it up. Matured in the Tel Aviv location. I'm like, what if it's not as good? So eventually I opened it, and it is really, really good. Because the new make's so good, obviously, and then pomegranate is quite a strong flavour. So yeah, fabulous stuff. Well glad I bought it.
I think that's still available on Master of Malt. I'm not sure.
I'll be looking on that just as soon as this is finished.
It's a real. If you have a lot of whiskey, it's a real conversation piece to have that one and say, it's firstly nobody knows generally that whiskey's made in Israel, and then when you talk about pomegranate casks and the fact that it's only 1 year old in a blind tasting, I bet it would be a cracker.
Yeah, that'll throw a few curveballs in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I thought I might have had a slither of a tiny little bit of that particular one left, but I haven't. I finished it, which is a shame because it was a corker. It was. Right. Okay. So, shall we dive into the?
Fee. I saw that you found the new make on Master of Malt. It's 40% ABV on Master of Malt. It's the first bottling of new make that we made. What you are tasting is 63.5. So the 40% isn't available already, but I think Master of Malt and the Whiskey Exchange, I put a link.
So the new make on Master of Malt is 40%?
Is 40%, yeah.
That's really unusual.
Yeah, we stopped doing it because in colder countries like yours, there was some sediments inside because of the in temperatures. So,
we actually like chewing on wood.
Yeah.
no, you don't feel it in your mouth, but just see it. It's oils.
Great.
Yeah, that is
But,
really
if you
really
do have
delicious
more
stuff.
on the Whiskey Exchange, I'll put it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very impressed, Thomas. Very impressed indeed.
So, thank you very much, Gary. Do you want to move to the peated one?
Yes, fire away, yes.
So this is 40 ppm peated whiskey, peated new make, and it's 100% made from peated barley, malted in the Czech Republic. So it's peat from the Czech Republic also. And it's unusual taste of peat. I really liked it. That's why we keep doing this peat twice a year, 2 weeks each time. And it's unusual and I really like it.
Did you try using different peats, you know, in the early days,
Yes.
you know, like a Czech peat or maybe a Scandinavian peat or?
We tried different peats. Now we will start buying also peated barley from Mantons, where we buy the regular malt. They just started to produce and sell peated barley, so we'll buy from them also. So I guess we'll have few types of peat, but it's interesting, it's good.
Yeah, because I know the Scandinavian stuff, you know, is like theirs it's got a very distinctive sort of aroma to it. You know, I suppose even the difference between an Islay peat and a Highland peat, for instance, you know, it can be very, very different. You know, the Highland peats have got more of those heather sort of funny notes, whereas I think even maybe the Scandinavian ones kind of have more of an earthy, more like almost a manure side of, not in a bad way, but have that more sort of funky smell to them, you know.
I love how you just said, Gary, manure, but not in a bad way.
You can
When is manure in a good way?
But Gary, do you find this one more like the Highland peat, the Highland peat, or more like the Islay peat? It's neither both of the peats, but it's more close to where do you think?
I know what Gary means about the peat, though. It's a bit like when people mention petrol and spirit. They don't mean that in a negative way. It's just that's the kind of the memory they get. So I'm with Gary with that.
Yeah, it's probably from growing up around farms a lot of the time when I was younger. These sort of like silage notes or these sort of manure notes that you get sort of come through, especially more in sort of peatier whiskies. You tend to find them a lot as well. You know, as those sort of more earthy, sort of almost sort of fungusy notes. You know.
I think Toma, did I hear right? You were asking the question of whether we felt this was more like an Islay peat or a Highland peat, or was that
like mainland question? Yeah, you're right. That's what I asked. Do you find it close to Islay peat or to mainland peat?
I would say more mainland than Islay. I think Islay's very distinct, whereas this is more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd go with Ireland.
Yeah, I would agree.
So Toma, your peated batch, when is that due out?
Okay, so we do have the Element series, which is the second tier of our portfolio, and we have three expressions in this in the Elements. One of them is peated cask, and the first batch of the Elements peated was only unpeated barley aged in ex-Islay casks, but the second batch will be about 50% made from peated barley. So it will be available in the UK, I guess, in 2 or 3 months.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know about you guys, but I got a new favorite.
No, you don't. I'll go. I'll log out and then you can talk.
Well, I mean, I know I'm a bit of a peat head, so obviously, you know, there was a chance that this was going to appeal to me personally, you know, hit above its weight, let's say. But that is lovely. That is genuinely lovely. I would actually sit and drink that.
How do you not think it's because I always feel that young whiskey works very well with peat, like quarter cask, and I haven't tried it yet, but the Ardbeg Wee Beastie. So I think this works really, really well together. It kind of brings out the fruitiness and sort of mutes off some of the maybe hotter aspects of it. Not that it's particularly hot, but maybe that says more about me than anything else.
I'm with you on this one, Andy.
I think it's lovely. I actually thought the first one was really nice, but that's excellent. I could happily just drink that.
It's really crazy on the nose. I didn't get a lot of the peat at all, but as soon as I had a taste of that, then you get this massive big barbecue hit.
Yeah,
it's like literally like a barbecue going off in your mouth as soon as you taste that stuff. You know, it was really, really nice.
Having followed Carl's method of diluting it as well, actually, even the diluted variant's really, really nice. It hasn't killed it.
You see, I didn't think as much of it diluted.
Just to mention, in the peated barley, we cut lower. We cut at 65, not at 70, because notes arrive later at the distillation.
But yeah, it's got a real meatiness to it, you know.
Yeah. Simon, you've been
it
very.
Makes me think of the Belecan.
Oh.
Yeah.
Simon, you've been very quiet. Are you gonna? Yeah, I think this might have been up your street as well. So I was just curious what you thought of this.
Well, I do like New Make anyway. I was drinking the Lag on Aaron, but this last one is absolutely stunning. I've liked most of them, but this one is just something else.
Yeah.
Totally different. And yeah, I'm a peathead as well, so.
And I agree with Gary on this one. You don't get a massive peat hit on the nose. It's actually, it doesn't get a lot of smoke either. I mean, coming from I love my Islays. It's all the barbecue on that taste. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And strangely, I don't know how or why, but it doesn't seem to be as kind of waxy as the unpeated. I'm not getting the legs on the glass.
I mean, there's nothing there in terms of the legs.
It's still waxy than some of the others. Absolutely, some of the others are clean. So it has something, but it's not as much, which is interesting, I think, in its own right.
Is that the cut points, Toma?
What?
Would that be the cut points on the distillation that's maybe not making it as viscous on the peated version?
Yeah, might be. Might be.
I mean, I have to be honest.
Are really high, so most of the heavier oils don't go inside. That's why we did the line arms 45 degrees down to get, anyway, some oiliness.
Yeah, that's super stuff. I'm looking forward to trying this when it gets released.
Thank you very much.
Ian, you're looking very, you're giving a lot of thought to this one. What's your view on it, if you don't mind me asking?
This is the first time I've ever come across milk and honey, and it's blown me away. This is phenomenal stuff. And like the guys were saying, the peated is less waxy and feels less. There's less texture to it maybe than the unpeated, and I'm trying to get my head around why that might be. Because you would usually expect to see a lot more of the heavier components and the heavier oils in peated versions rather than unpeated. So I'm just trying to wrap my head why that might be. Is it barley varieties? Is it cut points? I can't quite figure it out in my own mind.
I mean, even the maturation location might have had an impact on it in terms of, I don't know. Like you, I'm confused as well.
Wood extractives, yeah.
Carl, there can't be any maturation, it's new make.
Sorry?
Can't be maturation, it's new make.
Sorry. Yeah, that's a good point.
All right, I want to go back to your first sentence. Do you honestly find these two new makes different from other new makes that you tasted? Not in the way they are all different, we already know, but maybe by the location, or do you feel that it's something else that all you?
Well, I mean, one thing I would say is that every single one of the 7 for me have been very, very different. Even the last 2, you know, between and for obvious reasons, those 2 are quite distinct. You know, your unpeated and your peated are very different anyway. But I would say the unpeated milk and honey is very different from all the others. Just as if you picked any of them for me, they were all very distinct, very different.
If I'd say, for example, that before you knew it's milk and honey, of course, the unpeated one is from Speyside, some Speyside distillery. Would you believe that? It sounds strange for you?
I think if I was giving them all blind, I would still pick out that was something different from the rest.
Yeah, I would not have said this was a Speyside, I would have been confused. If that was blind, I would have been sitting there thinking, what the hell? I don't recognize it. Mind, I think, do you not find, though, that the lines are blurring between the regions dramatically anyway, in many respects?
Yeah, definitely.
So I don't think that, you know, you might have been able to argue that, say, 10, 15 years ago, but and certainly longer ago. But I think recently there's so much innovation going on and messing around with different wood management and different casks. I think it's very difficult to spot a region anymore the minute it goes into. But I mean, from a new make perspective, even at new make, I would have been confused.
Yeah, it's very different in a very, very good way.
Yeah.
Tom, what I would say is that your unpeated, the viscosity, the mouthfeel is more like a mortlack, given its waxy nature. I absolutely believe, but I think it's probably your line arm that gets rid of, you know, as in it takes a lot of those heavy notes that would make it a non-Speyside. It's almost bordering on an Islay without the peat. It doesn't have that smoke. It's a beautiful whiskey. Don't get me wrong here.
I totally understand.
But I think it's because you do things differently. You're not following the Scottish mould. You know, Scottish moulds are line arms at this and this and this. Islay kind of does a little bit of this. Your line arms, I think from what you said, your angles are perhaps even lower than the Islay whiskies. So you have an unpeated whiskey that generates a lot of heavy notes, which doesn't really fit any of the profiles that are out there. It's a beautiful new make. It's beautiful whiskey. And I think we all love whiskey for its differences. Yeah. Whether it's that fruity floral notes of the Speyside or the heavy peatiness of Islay, it makes no difference. All you're doing is enjoying a taste profile. Irish whiskey is different to Scottish whiskey, different to English whiskey, different to Israeli whiskey, and you're all great for your own individual reasons. And as I said, big fan.
Thank you very much.
Well said, Dave.
Okay, can I just ask? Sorry, Tomer. Is the peated and the unpeated whiskey, the way it's distilled, are the distills driven harder for one or the other? Are they both? Do they both have the same amount of reflux, or?
It's just in the same stills, so it has the same reflux and everything is just the same.
Wow. Okay.
I was going to ask as well. Where did you have the stills made?
But as I say, the peated one is cut at 5% down, so it gives other character and more faint, more heavy oils to the new make.
Yeah, Gary, what were you saying there? Because I think we missed you.
I was just asking, where did you have the stills made? Were they made in Scotland or?
No. So the worst still, we found it on secondhand website. It was in Romania.
Excellent.
And actually it was in really good price and in really, really good shape and good condition, of course. and we bought it for a really good price, and it produces really good low wines, not whiskey. It produced, I think, in Spain, but we couldn't find the source of it. So we think.
And was that? Did you say that was the wash still?
This is the wash still.
Okay, and what about the low wine still?
The spirit still produced for us by Carl, a family-owned company.
Not me.
In Germany. No, not Carl. So in Germany, and it designed for us.
Cool. So even your stills alone are totally unique to anybody else anywhere else in the world. You've got a second-hand still from an undisclosed nature
from Romania.
That's a nice.
Be careful, owners.
Yeah, one being Count Dracula, maybe.
One of the things about Toma is, despite his milk and honey background, and I can't obviously see him now because I'm looking at Carl. He's to his left. He's got a Port Ellen. He's got a Black Friday bottle, which I think is from the Whiskey Exchange, just over his right shoulder, but left as we see. I think that might be a Lefroy kicking around just next to it, and a whole bunch of other things. Yeah, is that a Lefroy kicking around that I can see there?
Yeah, it's a Lefroy cartridge, but I have a lot here.
A load of Kilhoman, Johnny Walkers.
Yeah, I have a lot of things, just like Carl or anyone else.
And look at that. Some good Lakes ones there.
I like the Lakes Distillery, and I'm of Daval. So
are they the full ones? The Cabitas? Whatever they're called.
Those are the 3 first whiskey maker reserve. They make.
And what are you enjoying currently in the whiskey sort of? What are you enjoying right now, Toma?
So I'm drinking a lot of things. Right now, I'm drinking the pomegranate special bottle bottled for our partners around the world. Only 40 bottles, so that's a really nice stuff. But I have Port Ellen opened here and Talisker and a lot of stuff.
Very nice.
Are you looking to sort of open up more into the UK market in the future?
We have a new partners in the UK, new distributor. So we are really looking forward to work better in the UK and to get into this market.
Excellent. I'd love to see some more of your products a bit more readily available, because I think once people get to taste this stuff, I think that it'll really open things up, you know. Hopefully make some of the other guys raise their game a little bit as well.
Well, I know I'm planning, since we've been locked down and it looks like it's going to be around for a lot longer, and we're certainly going into Christmas probably, I'm planning to do at least 2 more Christmas, or like a couple of Christmas party events. So maybe I could hopefully get a milk and honey in amongst the mix or 2 in those. So definitely be in touch. Okay. Well, guys, I don't know if you want to give any more feedback. Toma, thank you very much for sticking around. I know.
Thank you again.
It's now midnight now, your time. So, you know, I really appreciate your time and sticking around. And I hope you.
It's really nice to be here, and I look forward to the second session. I hope my tasting kit will arrive.
Well, I posted it the next morning. So you should hopefully, it'll hopefully be in your UK address, I would hope today or today. So hopefully you've got a chance of joining us for the tasting on the 10th. So thanks very much, Toma.
Thank you very much. And it was really, really great to be with you.
Brilliant. That's what I love to hear. Guys, I don't know what you want to say. You know, is there anything else you want to say? Any questions? Go for it, Simon.
Is it possible to buy a bottle of that peated new make?
I'll let Toma answer that one.
That all day long.
Well, the amount of money that you make.
Yeah, but Simon, I might have a little bit more of the peated new make. So next time you pop round, I'll do you out a sample of it.
Brilliant. I think
it's not massive amount, but you know,
all of them tonight. But it was really cool having a peated and unpeated one to compare.
Yeah.
Because of the differences that were there, that were surprising.
I guess
I'd happily drink most of them actually, as I can't wait till when all of them get to become whiskies.
Yeah.
Truthfully.
I mean, I'm pleased that you said that, Andy, because I know when I was obviously when I had the lineup that I managed to pull together. So and also some help from some of the guys that you know to introduce me and things like that, and the support from the distilleries. But ultimately, we had 12 distilleries that we had their new make of. And trying to come up with the best way of showcasing each one and getting the best contrast and how to sort of really make the best of them. I think I've been lucky to an extent because, for example, the first two that we tried were just an ideal sort of contrast. And I think I've just been very lucky because we've had some great new makes to play with, really. I don't think I could have cocked this one up. That good. So, I mean, you know, I think, I mean, I hope you guys have enjoyed this session because I think I feel as if I'm in a reasonable position for the next session. So session number 2, obviously.
Funny story, I didn't know it was 2 sessions until about a week ago when I asked you what yours was. I was like, literally 13 new make tastings in one night.
Yeah, that might have killed. There might have been some wreckage then.
Yes.
I mean, ultimately, when I first came up with the idea, I thought I might be lucky and get 5 or 6, maybe 7 new makes together and make a session out of it. But then all of a sudden, I found that there was a lot more interest, both from you guys, but also from the distilleries. So hence why I split it into 2 sessions. But actually, I've since then. For example, Bimber were going to be involved, but by the time they'd had the decision, for a variety of reasons, they weren't going to get the bottle to me on time, or the bottles to me on time. So as it happens, they're keen to take part in a session 3 if we decide to have one. And I think that there's going to be a session 3 based on the feedback so far. Hopefully, session 2 will be just as good.
Do you have Cotswolds, Golani, Glenmaria, people from those distilleries on the second one as well, Carl?
So the second one is, let me get the lineup. So in fact, it's on the PDF, but the first one is Cotswolds. Then it's Golani. So we have another Israeli distillery in there. Then it's Glenmaria, then Waterford, then Daft Mill, and then Glen Scotia. So we end up with Glen Scotia. So, I mean, there's a hell of a lineup for session 2 as well. Heck, I could have probably retired on the Daft Mill new make alone.
And do we have people actually on to talk about them as well, Carl?
Yes. So again, I'm hoping it's a shame because actually I know that Simon Thompson from Dornoch, he was intending to be here. So I'm hoping everything's all right because I know he was very keen to be here. And I think the same Lindores Abbey, there was a couple of the guys from Lindores Abbey that were planning to be here. So it's a shame because obviously it's nice to have, especially when the likes of Johnny and Tomer and that are with us and able to talk us through it and answer questions. It does add quite a bit to the experience, I think.
With Simon, it's probably just the internet connection in Dornoch.
Yeah. In fact, he probably mentioned that, you know, that there was a risk that he just wasn't going to be able to make it for that reason. But anyway, so yes, the plan is I'm hoping, for example, to get you know, somebody from every one of them to come along. I think Kirsty McCallum, for example, was keen. If not, Ian Allen is coming for the likes of Glenmaria. anyway, yes. So there's, I think so far I've got somebody lined up for each of them. Yeah.
Was it you that was mentioning about Annandale earlier, Carl?
Yeah. So I didn't properly reach out to them, and that's my own fault, and probably because I got a bit diluted in terms of who I was chasing after, and I lost track of who the hell I was asking and what was coming and what wasn't and all the rest of it. But yeah, I'd like to maybe get Annandale in as well if we do.
I just thought that again, sort of the same as they had with the milk and honey, because they do a peated and an unpeated new make.
Yeah,
would be quite a nice contrast, you know. I mean, personally, I prefer the peated stuff to the unpeated myself, but they were both very good. You know, I've actually still got a bottle of the peated new make. They were selling like a 500ml bottle. I think it was like Rascal liqueur or something they call it, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was really impressed with that stuff. Impressed enough that I bought a bottle. So.
Well, I mean, the biggest thing for me is if we do go on and do session 3 or you know, I would love to get a bourbon in here. I'd love to get new make bourbon.
That'd be cool.
I'd love to get some like a German distillery involved, and also a Scandinavian. I mean, I considered McMyra, but I never actually pulled my finger out and got in touch with them and pushed them on it.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I could speak to Mickey on that one and see if he can pull some strings for us.
Yeah, well, I know when he came on to do a chat with us a couple of weeks ago, I think he was keen. So it would be great if we could.
Yeah, he's joined us at a few hour tastings, and he stays about 5-10 minutes along the road from me as well. So
brilliant.
I'm on a regular occurrence, or used to anyway.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think Rebecca's mentioned Amrut. I mean, it would be fantastic to get. I mean, it's that variation. I think somebody touched on it. You know, what most of us share in common is that we actually want to explore a bit. We want to be sort of trying new stuff, even if we don't necessarily like it that much. At the end of the day, it's about experiencing it, and I think that's quite important.
Yeah, I mean, not everybody's going to like every whiskey that they try, but unless you try these things, and you're not going to know the next time you go into a bar, or you go and somebody offers you something, you know, or you're standing at a stall in a whiskey festival, unless you've tried these things and you know what you don't like, it's just as important to know what you don't like as it is to know what you like. Because then when you go to spend, especially, you know, everybody, or I'm sure a lot of us have done it, you know, at certain points, you know, you go into like a really nice whiskey bar in Edinburgh or something like that, you know, and potentially you could be paying 40-50 quid a night. You want to make sure that you're going to get something that you're really going to enjoy, you know, and if you don't know what you don't like, then you know, it's just as important as knowing what you do like, you know, is you've got to have some sort of contrast there to balance out, I think, you know. Yeah. Thankfully, I've never paid 30-40 quid for a dram and been disappointed.
Yeah. No, so, you know, I don't know if anybody's got any suggestions on how we might improve it.
So, Carl, maybe if I'd just like to say, you know, you spend a lot of time not just, you know, reaching out to the distilleries, but also I appreciate how long it takes to actually bottle these things up. So I'm sure I can probably speak for everyone and those who have left. Slanja, thank you very much for doing this. And if we can do a third, you know, and a fourth and a fifth, you know, truly, mate, thank you very much from all of us to you, because it takes a lot of bloody effort. So thank you.
I'll drink to that. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers, Carl.
Carol, after your concern about whether this would work or not, it's been a resounding success, and we're really looking forward to the second session already. And you'll be astonished to know that Kate and I ranked all 7 of them, and we agreed exactly with all 7. How amazing is that? So, no divorce tomorrow.
You guys can't have spent the whole lockdown period together. This is impossible. We'd be on. No, brilliant. I mean, thanks, guys, and thanks for coming along. I mean, it would have been a disaster even more if you'd taken on the sets and then just thought, right, I'm going to try them on my own, because, you know, then I've been talking to myself. So thank you very much for coming on as well, because I know a lot of people couldn't make it tonight that have even got the sets. But I have a feeling that they missed out a little as well. So Thank you.
We had to rush back to make it tonight because we just climbed 2 Monroes today. So up at 6 o'clock this morning on the way up mountains and come back to listen to you. So there you go.
Well, funnily enough, similar to yourself, when Jim McEwen rang before, he was apologising for not coming on. He's got a set for the night, and he wasn't able to join us because he's just got back on the ferry to Isla, having done the Rob Roy.
Excellent.
So that's what is it, 80?
Something like that.
Yeah, 80 miles or something. And he said his feet were absolutely killing him, and there's no way he could concentrate on. So I think that's a reasonable excuse, and you did well.
Well, I've just got a couple of things I'd like to say. One serious, one not so much. Toma had a chance about 90 minutes ago to jump in front of Dornoch and in front of Lindors. But because he knew the flow would be better if he didn't, he kind of said, no, crack on with those two. And he was happy to wait. And I think that's a measure of the man. And it's a shame he's not still on. I can see Jonathan's on. But, you know, people buy from people. And I thought that was a very, very nice touch. Yeah. So that's the kind of serious bit. The second one, does anyone think John Molden looks like he's out of a state penitentiary with his prisoner suit on, with that orange thing on? I think he's just escaped. Someone phone the police and tell them where he is.
I agree. Yeah,
just bars on the window.
Yeah, he's actually calling from the prison. Yeah.
I'd like to pleasure meeting John actually in Campbelltown just recently. I'm still alive. All I can say, he stole nothing. He was very genteel. He's a good man.
Yeah, they just locked me up again when I came back.
Hey, do you know what though, mate? I saw what you got from the cage, so I'm pretty sure you had a good time.
Yeah.
We've got. I don't know if any of you guys are interested. I know you touched as well, Carol, on you've got a Glen Scotia coming up, but I think I have a tasting coming up around about 20-something of October with the master distiller, Ian McAllister. So we're still kind of putting things in place, but it's looking like it could be quite a good tasting. There's going to be some quite interesting single casks in there as well, and I'm super excited to get Ian on board as well. I didn't actually plan to get Ian on board. I thought it was going to be one of the brand ambassadors, but yeah, they came back and said that he was going to join in. So yeah, fingers crossed, should be an interesting one as well.
Well, you know, Ian actually came along and did one of our earlier like guest nights.
Oh, cool.
He's brilliant. He's a fantastic bloke, really, and very, very knowledgeable. And I think he stuck around till like after 11 or something. You know, like we couldn't get rid of him.
Ian's a great guy.
Brilliant.
Ian's a
That's
great
a good
guy.
sign.
I know with Ian actually, so I know Ian from decades and decades ago, and I was brought up round the corner from Scotia, so I know Ian well. Really good guy.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and if he's helping out in terms of the selection for the tasting and that, there will be some fantastic whiskies in there.
I think they mentioned
gradually more and more a fan of Scotia anyway.
I think they did mention there's a new release. I think it's I don't think it's out in the shops yet, but it was just being released in the last week or two. I think is their new sort of like seasonal release.
It's just coming out in within the next fortnight. It'll be out here. I think it's already out in Germany.
Yeah,
it's an 11-year-old sherry double cask.
That's right. It was a sherry double sherry. Is it a PX and Oloroso? Is it?
Oloroso, and I think it's unpeated as well. But it's not a big sherry bomb apparently. But I should have that by hopefully end of next week.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to it.
Brilliant. Well, guys, I don't know about you, but I'm probably going to do one myself. Thank you very much, and looking forward to our next get-together on the 10th. If obviously I do, if I get another guest along, then it'll be another Wednesday night, and obviously I will try and see if I can get a guest along maybe, and we can have another get-together. Obviously, the next session is on the 10th of October. And that's when we'll be going through those new makes that are lined up before. And then the next event after that is going to be the 24th of October, which is our private audience and virtual tasting with none other than Jim McEwen, where I've got that amazing lineup of distillery exclusives and stuff. So from my recent trip to Islay. So I haven't released the tickets and that for that yet. Although some people have informally reserved some spots. There's going to be about 50 sets, 48, I think. That's going to be released only to people who've taken part in virtual tastings with NEWAS to date. And any that might be left after that will go to whoever wants them after that. And then we're going to be raising, with every set that we sell, there's going to be some money being put to Gordon Vogie care home on the island. So we're it's a very good cause. So yeah, I'm really excited about that one. I mean, Jim is kind of a bit of a sort of hero of mine, so I'm really looking forward to that. And he's such a...
Don't forget to mention the bottle auction that Jim's putting a bottle in, isn't he?
Yeah, so Jim said he was going to put a bottle in from his private collection as well, and he's going to sign it and things. So that should be good at the end as well, to do a little mini bottle auction for him or with him.
Is that on the same night, Carl? Just so I understand.
Yeah. So well, that's my understanding, but obviously it's Jim that's putting in the bottle. I presume he'll be doing it on that night, and I'll do that auction. Assuming he's still definitely putting it in and things, so no pressure.
If I know Jim, it'll be his plan. He'll get everybody steaming drunk first, and then he'll put the auction on, so you dig deep into your pockets.
If I know these guys, that when we did the bottle auction for the Trussell Trust, again fairly early on in the lockdown, we had situations where people were going bonkers, and this was before they were all drunk. I'm sure it was, and they were paying more than they could buy the bloody bottles off. So that's how generous this bunch is. So I don't think he even needs to get them drunk, to be honest.
Carl, is the fundraiser that you're doing with the Really Good Whiskey Company, is that October? Because there was talk of that about a month ago.
Yeah, I think the date is the 1st of November for that. And I'm not entirely clear as to how much of an input I'm doing on that. I don't know whether I'm to actually kind of be the host of it and do the auction or what. I've just kind of been in the background. I haven't done as much as obviously the first time that we did it. So yeah, I'm not in as much control on that one as the first one. So, but massive number of, I think they were heading towards 30 bottles an hour in the auction, because I was raising some concerns that how the hell are we going to go through 30 bottles in an auction on a single night? So that's going to be fun. So yeah.
Well, we've just got to hope,
November.
Just got to hope for some bidding fatigue, and then we'll get some bargains.
I already know you guys can go on till like 2, 3 in the morning if need be. So
getting a bit older now though, so not sure that's going to happen.
Oh, that was a bit below the belt.
It was me and myself.
Well, I just hope, Jeremy, that we can have you in the next tasting. Sorry, John?
I said we can go on that long, but I don't think our wallets can.
Yeah, you do have a point there. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, but Jeremy, hopefully you'll be able to take part in session 2. We'll get that test, we'll get the set sorted and get it over to the ASAP.
Sounds great, yeah. So
yeah,
it'll be a bit more fun being able to taste along as well.
Definitely. So guys, I know Mike's still here, head of IT and senior doorman as well. So if there's any trouble, he sorts you out.
He doesn't stay that late himself.
Guys, fantastic again, and it was all good. We're definitely on for session 2, and it went as good, if not better, than what I could have hoped. So I hope it's the same for you guys.
Yeah.
Carl, before you go,
Thank you very much, Carl.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and Mike as well for the IT.
Yeah.
Cheers, Jeremy.
Yeah, keep it all moving.
Mike is the unsung hero, to be fair. We always thank Carl for sorting the drams out, but Mike, seriously, thank you very much for sorting out the Zoom meetings and keeping it all going, buddy. So we never speak about you, but thank you. And you're very quiet in these sessions.
Well, that's how I like it. I know because I'm busy trying to copy files around or something.
Well, next time Carl's calling on you first. Just remember that, Carl.